I'd like to call the February 5, 2013 meeting of the Buncombe County Board of Commission to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you'll join me in prayer. God, thank you for our county, our family, our friends, the beautiful place you've entrusted us to take care of. Thank you for the people we represent and try to do justice and goodwill and take care of. We need your guidance and help in doing our job. Give us judgment, discernment, and ability to listen to all sides of the issues and to help all citizens, including the common people and working people, help them to grow and prosper with our decisions and the judgments that we are asked to make. Hold us accountable to the higher order and hold us to the highest standards of your belief system and all that you do for us. God, thank you for this chance to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to serve. Amen. We have a published agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as it's presented, including that would be adoption of all the consent agenda items?
Move approval.
There's a motion by Commissioner Jones. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner King. Is there any discussion of following the agenda as it's been published? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. We will follow the agenda as it has been printed. Once I find the first page. Hey. We're on public hearing. Let's see, Ms. Trumpy, if you'll come up and talk to us about the zoning change recommended by the Planning Board.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is an initial zoning hearing rather than a rezoning as you're used to. It is an initial zoning of 10 different lots. The numbers, tax lot pin is map 964381, lots 9765, lot 9653, 7692, lot 6275, lot 9103, lot 9433, lot 5686, lot 9219, and also block 80, lot 7599, and block 82, lot 6152. These properties were not zoned back in 2009 as we adopted countywide zoning. The reason is that it didn't meet the statutory requirements, which would be located next to other county zoning or at least a square mile in area. And these lots are to the east of I-26, just east of the airport properties and WNC Ag Center properties. So they were isolated from the other county zoning by the city of Asheville, and therefore we could not zone those properties at that time. Session Law 2012-121 this past year transferred zoning authority from the city of Asheville to the county for the airport properties and for the WNC Ag Center. And now that we have zoned those properties, these other lots are adjacent to county zoning and meet statutory requirements to be zoned by the county. It's 10 lots. The total acreage is 16.23. The lots range in size, the largest being 6.99 acres, the smallest being 0.05 acres. It's an area of mixed use. There are 5 lots that have commercial uses, 4 lots are vacant, and 1 is used by a church currently. The properties are very close to the Asheville Airport, and the current lack of any zoning regulations removes control for the types of uses and height of structures that the county would have with zoning. And the Airport Authority is quite concerned that incompatible uses or excessive height of structures could interfere and create safety concerns. The Planning Board held a public hearing regarding the proposed zoning on October 1st of 2012. There was one person who spoke during public comment. He wasn't opposed to zoning, he just asked some questions. The Planning Board found that the proposed EMP zoning would be consistent with the comprehensive land use plan, as the update describes the EMP district as intended to provide appropriately located sites for employment concentrations, primarily of office-type uses, industrial uses, storage and warehousing, and wholesale trade. This EMP district includes existing industrial and office areas and sites suited for future development. The Planning Board also found the proposed EMP zoning is reasonable and in the public interest, as the property is not currently zoned and is located in the jurisdiction of Buncombe County and is located in a mixed-use area within close proximity to I-26 and the Asheville Regional Airport. And the Planning Board unanimously recommends approval of this zoning. I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them at this time.
All right, any questions for Ms. Trumpy? If not, we'll go ahead and start the public hearing. 3-minute public comment. What's the number if there are more than 8 people? Get one spokesperson gets 10 minutes if there are 8 people that want to give their time. We'll go ahead and start a public comment at 4:40. Any members of the public wish to be heard? Mr. Summey?
My name is Mike Summey, and at one time or another, I owned 8 of those 10 lots that they're talking about. Some of the smaller lots were people's yards that I basically just gave to them because I had no use for them. But I have some things I'd like to pass around to you if you'd not
Yes, sir.
count that on my time.
No, stop time. It's fine.
Just let y'all pass around and look at these. We had a project in the works to build on the vacant lot, the 3.5 acre vacant lot. The work had all been done on this, the marketing packages put together, everything, and they just got completed like the month that the bottom fell out of everything. So nothing happened. The concerns with the airport, I think there's one of these for each of you. This is the determination letter from the FAA with the property, whether it's zoned or not. The height restriction there, you have to get approval from the FAA for that, whether there's any zoning or not. And in the process of putting this package together, we produced 1,100 copies of these packages. I think I've given each one of you one that contains a marketing brochure in here. There's a disc that has the marketing brochure on a PDF format, also on a PowerPoint presentation, and then there's a movie, computer-generated movie, fly around and tour through the building as if it were already built. So there's quite a lot of money gone into this project up to this point. I've owned that property over 25 years there, kept it mowed, let the community use it for a playground, have let when I had a business out there, let my employees use it to park cars for the fair, and then later kids parked there, and all the parking money that we took in for that, we let them split it up, divvy it up, and help them with their school, help the employees and things with it. This property, these marketing packages say in the packages that the property is not zoned, that we don't have to go to public hearings to get started. And personally, I can see absolutely no advantage to the county whether it's zoned or not zoned, because this piece of property that this building is planned for is the only thing out there really that's not already developed. And I would just ask you to delete this from the zoning, or at least put it off until you can study the issue further, because I think all of you would like to see this building built there at some point down the road, and I can't tell you whether it can be started this year, next year, or the year after. It's a lot's going to depend on the economy and how it takes off. But in any event, whatever the determination is, just keep in mind from the airport standpoint, we got to meet the FAA guidelines irregardless whether it's zoned or not, and that's what that determination letter is.
Thank you, Mr. Summey. And we'll get that back to him. So I wanna- Okay, any other members of the public? Yes, sir, Mike. Mike Reisman, the airport.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Mike Reisman. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Asheville Regional Airport. Very quickly, Mr. Blywise sends his apologies. He had a prior conflict that caused him not to be able to be here today. The property in this proposal, as you're well aware, is located immediately adjacent to the Asheville Regional Airport, and as such, the airport authority does have some concerns about the zoning and the use on the property. To start off with, it's important to point out that the airport does not have any objection whatsoever to any development on this property, provided that that development is both compatible in nature and does not exceed the height zoning requirements or penetrate any of the height zoning limits around the airport for some of the traffic pattern airspace. Uses also that interfere with flight operations that might be normally compatible but otherwise might interfere are things that create glare, produce smoke, or otherwise have the ability to interfere with visibility around the airport or for a pilot in the cockpit of an aircraft. It's important to point out, as you consider whether you should or shouldn't zone this property, that at the present time, because of the historical nature of the way the county has sponsored the airport grant programs, that the county is subject to a variety of federal grant assurances to help protect the airport from both incompatible surrounding land uses as well as from incompatible heights, incompatible height of objects around the airport as well. The new airport authority does seek eventually, as the transition is completed, to hopefully remove this liability and accept this liability from the county so that the county is no longer on the hook for that liability, but rather the new airport authority would accept that liability on behalf of the county. However, that's going to be extremely difficult for the airport authority to do if the property is not zoned properly. With the establishment of zoning and as well as the establishment of an airport zoning overlay district, which would limit the height of objects, would basically put into place the protection that the airport needs to ensure that we can accept the liabilities the liabilities that go along with being the sponsor of the airport. Without the zoning and without the height zoning around the airport as well as the property zoning, the airport is unable to assure to the Federal Aviation Administration that adequate controls are in place to maintain compatibility of those properties. This particular site, or this grouping of sites, are well within the existing traffic pattern airspace for the airport. Objects exceeding the height limits could easily have a negative impact on flight operations and generate significant safety concerns. The prior aeronautical study, and I'm not clear about what Mr. Summey might have just handed you, but I assume it's the aeronautical study that was performed several years ago for the structure that he's proposing. I might point out that again, we have no objection to the structure. However, when that aeronautical study was performed, I believe the original structure did exceed the height limit. Okay. The FAA did put a limit on that. In closing, we do request that the zoning be put in place. We also request that future height zoning be considered. And any of those height limitations would be determined through an FAA or nautical study. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Any other public comment? Which one? Yes, sir, Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I've known Mr. Summey for years, like most of you have. Very good businessman, and I think the consideration that he's asking is worthwhile to take under consideration. It's business, it's money, it's tax money coming into the county. We don't need to let that down. We've seen big projects in the cities, high rises and everything else. The airport, if he can confine it to that, I think you ought to approve it. I think it's worthwhile to make sure our business people in the community is getting the advantage because they have to pay taxes. And the airport safety things, you can't exceed federal law no way. So if you can approve it within limits, I think it's a good thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Any other public comment? If not, I'll declare the public hearing closed at 4:49. Ms. Trumpy, I have a question. Will Mr. Summey be able to build this under the EMP that he's projected?
He has not submitted any kind of application, but from the indications we've received from him, that he probably has sufficient expenditures that he would be able to do that with FAA approval. Otherwise, that type of business would be allowed in the EMP district. He would have to seek a height variance in order to go as high as he's indicated he'd like.
Okay. And is there any other part of the county that's not zoned at all?
There are a couple other places under the same circumstances. One is between Woodfin and the city of Asheville zoning, completely surrounded by it, and another is between Woodfin and Weaverville zoning, completely surrounded by their zoning and not a square mile in area.
Are we going to hear those also? Or are
Well,
they?
statutorily, we can't zone those because they're not a large enough area.
Okay, and the reason this one's different is that the General Assembly changed the jurisdiction and then made us contiguous to it, right?
That's correct. Now it's contiguous to county zoning and does meet statutory requirements.
Are there any other parts of the county where we're contiguous to that are not zoned at all?
No, we zoned everything that statutorily met those requirements.
Any other questions? Ms. Trumpy?
I have one. Is there any way to zone this but yet protect this project? In other words, I'm asking, is it possible to grandfather this in?
Well, if the area is zoned.
Provided it met, the FFA regulations and those things, could we not? Because we certainly want to accommodate our businesses if we can, and we don't want to hamper the airport, but I don't see, a conflict necessarily. So that's my question.
When something is zoned, there aren't really contingencies that you can place on property that would be something that could not meet those requirements. But the fact that Mr. Stummy has been working on this project for a long time and had some major expenditures, with proper submissions, it's likely that his project would be grandfathered.
Would this be a possible one that should maybe go back to the planning board and have Mr. Summey work with the planning board? I mean, your opinion?
My opinion is that it wouldn't even have to go to the planning board if he submitted supporting documents showing his expenditures and efforts made towards this project.
See Mr. Frew making his way. Mr. Frew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I guess just to echo what the concerns of the Airport Authority are, we know that the airport is essentially parallel to I-26, and this property is on the other side of I-26. Now, as a primary grant sponsor for FAA requests through the Airport Authority, the county has signed off on a number of requests where FAA dollars have come into the Airport Authority. As such, we're bound to terms and conditions of those airport grant authority, and part of those require land use restrictions through reasonable means, including zoning in applicable areas. Now, this piece of, so that's my first concern, would we run afoul of the FAA grant authority if we did so? I think the problem down the future is if the FAA were going to undertake a future expense or a grant and or the Airport Authority would make a future request, would that tie the hands of the Airport Authority to get a further request in the future if they know that the Airport Authority, especially under circumstances where they accept grant authority, they couldn't insure it because there'd be no zoning in place for that particular piece of property. Now, what might happen would be that if we leave this unzoned, that we know it's not the plan today, and we don't know who the future owners will be, but without zoning, they could put, for instance, a 150-foot tower there if they met all the applicable standards, and that would not comply with the FAA regulations for height limitations. Now, there's other FAA regulations. You have to sort of picture in your mind a giant football stadium and drop that football stadium on top of the runway. And it's a big flat area out for, I don't know, almost a mile in all directions in a circle, and then it starts to go up into a bowl shape. So the farther you get out, the higher structures can be, but this is well within the field area where the height limitations are pretty strict. To go back to what Commissioner King was indicating, it's not really a situation where you can go back and request or work with the planning board to accommodate, because as Debbie mentioned, you can't put a contingency on an approval. If zoning is placed on this property, he could go in, and if there's enough information in terms of work done on the ground in addition to expense, then he could have a vested right. It could be found by the Board of Adjustment or even through the courts if need be. We hope it wouldn't come to that. But if there's a vested right found in that regard, that would still doesn't go forever. It would be limited to duration, perhaps 2 years, and maybe extended in certain circumstances. But if it remains unzoned, then there's no time limit on that right, which you might have on unzoned property to proceed. So those are my main concerns in terms of the FAA requirements. Are we running afoul of our promises on those as primary grant sponsors to the FAA and the Airport Authority? And I think we may be, unless we zone the property. And my last point is, as we're proceeding now, the planning board is looking at changes to the land use plan. We haven't made any changes to the land use plan in several years, but part of that is to try to make sure that zoning works better for everybody. And since we now have the jurisdiction of the airport, part of the idea is to put an overlay to make that processing for airport needs more particular to that piece of property and make it more appropriate.
Well, Mike, we've got, FAA is going to trump anything we do, and Mr. Summey does.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. I mean, I've talked to Mr. Blywise on a couple occasions, and the FAA isn't interested in telling people how to use a particular piece of land. I mean, they're concerned about air corridors and air traffic, but I think the concern is if they have these rules and regulations, they want to see them implemented and maintained on a local level.
So, Mr. Frew, back to Mr. King's point, the letter that we have here says that the previous letter in 2006 says it does not exceed height requirements and it's not a problem. And my concern, where is that picture at? Where are those pictures at? Are they down there somewhere? Just hold up the office building. Any major airport, any airport, an awful lot of the big airports that I've flown into all over this country has that type of building around it, whether it be a Marriott, whether it be a Hilton, whether it be a series of office buildings. To me, if they issued the approval in 2006, they'd probably issue it again. And, I'm concerned about, I would love to see, if we can pull it off, I would love to see something around that airport that's going to jumpstart that type of development to where we would have the Marriotts, and we would have some of the other things out there, especially, I mean, it's already booming out there in that Skyline area either, also, but it seems to me that this would be a way to do that, but you probably couldn't have it open. You know, maybe you might have to put a time limit on the grandfather, I don't know, but it seems like if you can do it for the EMP because of the amount of money that Mr. Summey has spent, then maybe you could zone the rest of it and grandfather this around it. But I've just seen this at so many airports everywhere, and we lack that here. And just kind of thinking it might be a jump start for some of that type of development that the FAA seems to me they would, as someone has already said, I think Chairman Gant, about trumping that anyhow.
Well, I can't speak to other airport authorities anywhere,
Sure.
but I do understand that this one is well within the envelope where they have a model FAA zoning plan for an area. Yes, that FAA approval from several years back has expired. They may approve it again, they may not. And it is a question, and I understand that it's a pain in the rear to have to go apply for something in the future that you don't have to today. But it's now within the jurisdiction of the county and it should be zoned.
Okay. Mr. Newman?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the, I'd like to support the planning board's recommendation for the initial zoning of the properties. And I'll share a couple of thoughts about the reasons I think we should move forward with that. First, I think there's a certain question of sort of equity and fairness in terms of property owners in Buncombe County, and we have countywide zoning, and it applies to every single other property owner in Buncombe County who are in the same circumstance. So I think on an equity standpoint, I would have difficulty granting a special circumstance that would apply literally to only one property owner and not to anybody else in the county. So as a starting point, that's one of my reasons for supporting it. I do think that the arguments that the proximity of the property to the airport are pretty compelling, that we should at least put in place some initial land use policies and plans for the property, in particular around the airport, even if we didn't have countywide zoning, which we do. And then just, I guess, and then third, we do have a recommendation from the planning board on this issue, and it is a unanimous recommendation, 9-0. So those are the three reasons that I'm supportive of taking this step. But I guess just the other opinion I would share with this is that, I mean, it sounds like every single person who has kind of shared a view about it tonight thinks the project concept is great and doesn't want to do anything to in any way hinder a project like it. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, that looks like exactly the kind of development that would be great to have around the airport property. And I think when the economy gets some legs under it, it seems like a great project, and I want to do everything I can to be supportive of it. And it sounds like the zoning that's being recommended is very compatible with that type of development. So very supportive of the project as a concept, but I know technically we're not voting on any project. We're just putting in place the initial zoning, and then any of the uses that could be developed under that type of zoning could come forward. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll end my comments there.
Been a motion by Commissioner Newman. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
And if I could ask Chairman Newman,
Yes.
if we didn't know how, or still don't know how the board's going to decide, and we didn't put a model ordinance for your consideration in place, but if your motion would include that you find it reasonable and in the public interest, some of the magic words that we usually like to put into the ordinance.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Mr. Fryer?
Thank you. As far as the zoning part of it, when did this go in effect? The airport was taken away 6, 7, 8 months ago from the city, so now we have jurisdiction. Mr. Summey had a plan that he couldn't fulfill because of the economic times, and it was a plan before zoning became in Buncombe County. I think Mr. Summey should be able to go forward with his project as he has it laid out without more added expense from the county from having to plan a totally different situation, because once they lay out whatever zoning they want, then all the permitting, all of everything else that comes forward, it runs this project up. He has a beautiful project. Him and the airport have to figure it out, because it's like you said, they trump us. The feds trump us totally. And so personally, I'd rather leave it laying the way it is at the present time totally. I will not be for zoning this property.
I have a question, and Ms. Trumby answered this to some degree. Does this have to be an all or none kind of thing? I mean, I'm not opposed to the zoning, but if we can somehow protect Mr. Summey's project, at least for, I don't know, a period of time, if we could give him the time to file the paperwork or what's necessary. None of us want to do anything that hampers or ties the hands of the airport. I mean, that's a vital part of Buncombe County, and we're going to protect that. But I guess I'm asking, is this all or none? Is there not a compromise somewhere in this?
Once a property is zoned, then it does, anything has to go through those procedures that are set forth in the zoning ordinance. So you couldn't zone it but this is an exception. It is zone or not zone. He does have the option to try to get established vested rights, or to file plans to build as is and request certain variances that would be needed to do that.
Okay. And I assume this would be zoned commercial. What happens to his project if it becomes zoned, I guess?
It would be zoned EMP. It would allow that type of building as far as uses go. EMP's maximum height is 90 feet, so it would require a variance in height if there weren't any kind of vested rights established.
What is the height on this project?
The FAA approved up to 162 feet in that prior approval, which has expired.
Sorry?
140.
Building height that's proposed is about 140. The FAA approved 162. It's well outside that hole that they're talking about. I'm a pilot myself, I'm flying down there every week. It's absolutely would not interfere with the airport.
All right.
So if I understood you, there's two avenues to try to make the project happen if this is zoned. There's the avenue of going forward looking for variances. Can y'all hear me? I'm sorry. And there's the avenue of vested rights.
That's
Is that
correct.
So we don't know what would happen on either one of those, but it seems very possible that either one of those routes would unfold in a way that would allow this project to unfold.
Yes, ma'am.
I think, based on fairness, and Commissioner Schreier's point that these plans had been made, I think if we spoke to a lot of people in Buncombe County, a lot of people would say they had great plans before zoning was enacted. And I think, to me, if everything else in Buncombe County is zoned, I think it's pretty tough to make an exception because somebody had a plan, because I think we'd find a lot of people that had plans.
Any other discussion or comments?
Yeah, I've
Mr.
got it.
Newman?
So, I mean, I think I think the height question, I mean, I think it's a very legitimate concern. And so so what would be, so I mean, if in concept we're saying, look, we believe we should put, we shouldn't leave this property unzoned, if that's not where we think the right place to be is, but we don't want to put in place a zoning plan that is specifically incompatible with, I mean, if everyone here is saying, we look at this kind of project and seems like a very appropriate type of development near the airport, so we don't want to put in place some regulations that would hinder it. I mean, what would be the process to I mean, do we have any other zoning category that would sync up a little bit more closely with the kind of concept we have here, where, you know, where I think what we're hearing is that a building that would be too tall would be a problem for that proximity to the airport. But otherwise, this is a pretty dense area of the county. So, you know, fairly intense development is really appropriate at this site. So what would be the step if we approve this? Well, let me just back up one step. What would be a way we could get zoning in place, but still have the height compatibility that the property owner is seeking here?
None of our zoning districts allow a height that is for this proposed building. The EMP district actually has a much higher allowed height than the other districts. The EMP allows 90 feet, whereas the next highest one is commercial service at 50 feet.
Okay, so if we wanted to address this concern and not put in place a zoning, I mean, obviously the property owner could always come back with specific plans and seek a variance on that. But, you know, I can understand why that would be a concern from a property owner standpoint, because there's always a chance that, you know, you may not have enlightened folks up here like you do now, and maybe they wouldn't grant the variance. But, so if we wanted to kind of not put the land in a zoning category that's incompatible with that height goal, would we have to create a different zoning category that contemplates that, or would there be some other mechanism on the front end, short of Mr. Summey being prepared to actually submit specific development plans at the point where his project's ready to move forward? Would there be is there some other process we could go through to address this concern?
There isn't another zoning district that would allow the project as it is right now, without certain other approvals or variances that would have to take place. So it would require fashioning a district, and then you run into the problem of spot zoning. If you wrote a district just for one property owner and applied it there, I think the courts would probably see that as a spot zoning and treating one property owner
Sure.
differently than all the others around him.
I can see that. I wonder if, I mean, a couple of thoughts. I mean, I wonder if maybe we should reconsider that height number for this zoning category more across the board, so that we're not, again, giving benefits to one property owner that doesn't accrue to others. I mean, that would be one idea. But, I mean, in concept, I believe that we should not leave this property unzoned, but I am reluctant to put in place a specific regulation that would place what, you know, by all accounts, I think most of us would look at and say, this seems like an appropriate development plan here, and where it would specifically prohibit that height development capability on that site.
Where did the height derive from?
It was really derived from the original zoning ordinance. Now, what I was going to say is that, you know, we're going through the land use plan update. We get finished with that, we're going to go back and look at an airport overlay. And we can work with their modeling and the overlay and see if there can be some height variances above what we're talking about on the 90 feet. I can't sit here and make any promises, but obviously we'll look at their model and see what kind of adjustments. I mean, I agree with Commissioner Belcher that, you know, you've been to airports where there's a Hilton or a Hyatt across the street that's multi-stories. So we can look at that. The other thing is that I wanted to mention, let's not just concentrate on this project that Mr. Summey has, that it may never take off and he may sell that land. And if all of a sudden we get an incompatible use that's close to the airport, whether it may be something that has a smokestack, creates a lot of dust, or let's just say that, I don't know, it's a tire recycler. And all of a sudden, the tires catch on fire one day, and, you know, it may take a week or two to put the fire out. Then you've got a fire right next to the airport in not a very compatible use. So it's other things that may happen other than a multi-story building there. So, you know, I hope that this does go. I mean, I think it's a great project. But if it does, and then on down the road, if we're talking about 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and it's unzoned, it's just sitting out there allowed to basically do whatever the property owner wants, other than what FAA regulations would require. So.
John, what would you, to kind of go further with what Commissioner Newman's saying,
Right.
what would you see the overlay, the differences for a airport overlay, particularly in this area close to the airport? What would you see different in the overlay from outside the overlay?
Well, obviously, the things that may happen around an airport. I mean, if you go to an airport, and I may ask Mike to give me a hand here, but, you know, a FedEx facility, hotels. I mean, I understand that there is another hotel planned in the area. Want to try to look at those things that are compatible along with airport uses. I mean, we have a small airport, but that doesn't mean that you know, it won't become a major hub for a certain type of industry or manufacturer or whatever. And that's why we want, in the land use plan, we are trying to go back through and kind of refine things to make it more suitable for today than what it was back in the early 80s when we drafted the thing. We found there's a lot of things over the last, well, the 2 planning boards that we've talked land use plan update, is that it's time to refine the process to look at a lot of different ways. Now that we have the airport in our jurisdiction, obviously we want to make it more compatible but easier for things to happen. I mean, you know, that don't cause problems, but if they are compatible use, we want to make it easier than, okay, I got to get a variance for this or whatever.
Mr. Creighton, I flew into that airport in the 60s, and what says, you know, we haven't had zoning around it. It has built up out there. What says somebody's going to put a tire recycling thing on Mr. Sumney's property? Or, you know, when this total county wasn't zoned not that long ago, we had ordinances that we could stop things without the zoning. Now, he's looking at losing from, if my number's right, she said the zoning we have is 90 feet tall. He's looking at a 140-foot building. So are we going to ask him to take 40 foot off the design that he's got and lose money? How are you going to get hotels and stuff in here that you're going to establish a height or that particular height now, or are you going to break off into more height in the process? You know, it seems like zoning, everything keeps changing from week to week. We look at it one way, then we have to change it another way to make it fit in the area that we want it to fit. So I think he has a plan. I think it's a good plan. It's a very nice looking parcel, and if he's 20 foot lower than the airport, then the airport should make a decision whether he could or he couldn't. And I do think Mr. Sumney ought to step up and say at a certain point that he needs to build it. I agree with that, just like it says.
Okay. I mean, you know, we're not saying he can't build it. We're just saying, or he has to take, you know, 40 feet, 50 feet off the building. We're just saying that, you know, he needs to go get a variance and ask a board that's been appointed by the commissioners to take a look at this and see if it's feasible along with FAA.
But at the present time, it's not zoned.
That's correct.
I have one other kind of clarifying question on the whole height issue. You know, and I think that, I mean, while again, I think I look at a project like this and I think it looks great. I think it would be great. I hope it happens. I mean, but the height of buildings, I mean, this is no small matter. You know, I mean, even in downtown, I mean, people argue over how tall is too tall. I think in this particular situation, as long as you're not crossing any of those FAA safety thresholds, is probably going to be not a real controversial issue. It looks like, I think most people would agree that's would be great to have near an airport. But setting height limits, I mean, my experience is that that's something that people take those issues seriously in the mountains. And so one distinction I just want to make sure I understand in the ordinance is that for properties that are zoned under this zoning category, they have the limit of 90 feet. They can to build something taller than that in that zoning category, you have to get a variance. That's the process. I mean, I guess just as we kind of think about this going forward, I mean, another way that perhaps it could be looked at would be to say, you know, the use by right in terms of height in this zoning category, maybe it is a certain number, maybe it's 90 feet, but that with a certain approval threshold, it can go up to another higher category. Because I guess the thing that doesn't feel quite right is that while anybody's allowed to seek a variance, it seems that it sort of puts the burden of proof more on the property owner to kind of prove that that the normal standards shouldn't apply. Whereas to the extent possible, you know, I'm more supportive of policies that you know, where to do something that most people would agree is a good outcome should not require variances, you know, on the, at least on the big issues. So what is the timing for going through this airport overlay process?
It will be after we do the land use plan. So, you know, I'm hoping at this point to get the land use plan to the commissioners. I'm saying midsummer. So as soon as after that, I mean, there's a number of things that we want to start trying to clean up. And you know, I obviously the overlay's the answer now. I can't sit here and say it is the answer because I'm not sure, you know, without sitting down and looking at the modeling and working with the airport that we can accommodate that. But I agree with you that, you know, obviously it's a viable thing to look at.
Okay, so just, these maybe are my final comments on this for now. So I mean, just to reiterate though, because I think I'm gonna withdraw my motion on this. So but I would support, but you know, what I would support on this would be, and this might sound like a subtle thing, but again, I think it does matter, you know, in terms of placing the burden on the property owner to get a variance as opposed to simply going through an approval process. If this zoning category allowed taller buildings, even if the governing board or planning board had to vote for buildings over a certain height, so we don't give, because I'd also be uncomfortable giving carte blanche for having, you know, 140-foot tall buildings in every single parcel that might have the zoning now, or at least I'd want to think that through a lot more carefully before deciding it. But I don't feel comfortable requiring a variance on the property owner in this particular situation for that. So if there was a different way to handle that, or if through this overlay process it could be addressed, I'd be supportive of that too. So I'd like to get there, but I'm not quite comfortable that this particular zoning category is the right fit for this piece of property. So I'm going to withdraw the motion.
Okay, since he's done that, a question. And it's great comments regarding the EMP and the description. Can this be referred to committee to look at exactly what he's talking about on the EMP to take the burden of this proof off of the landowner? Can that be done?
I think we obviously we can take it back to the planning board. It's just the problem we've got is that we're going through the land use plan, you know, update and trying to get, you know, work with the airport and get, you know, I mean, get the overlay in. I mean, obviously we can take it back, but if we turn around and say, okay, in the overlay, we can only go 120 feet, then we're still in the same place we are today. It still doesn't meet his 140-foot requirements. And that, you know, that may be subjective. It may be what the airport feels comfortable with. It may be looking at the modeling, but no. Obviously, you know, you got to be careful to say, well, an employment will allow 160-foot buildings because, you know, obviously there's places that we may have employment that it's not conducive to have a 160-foot building just sitting out there, you know, basically that the public would see as a missile, you know, sitting in the Shenandoah Valley or whatever.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the way this direction is going. It's you know, going in support of that type of project around there. But you know, I'm hearing that, you know, there wants to, you know, that a lot of the members of the board want to have some sort of zoning around that, but that we don't want to interfere with this project too. And is there a way to maybe look at it when you do the land?
And there's, you know, also is that, you know, we're talking about the height. I mean, we've not seen a set of plans. I mean, there may be other issues out there associated with this, whether it's a buffer or there's enough parking, on-site parking. Is the lot large enough to, you know, to do stormwater, those kind of things. So you know, it could be a lot larger than just the height problem. All I've seen is basically a picture like you have.
I think I feel like we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. I think the question is whether or not we zone this bit of land, and whether or not we do that, or if we do that, it does not preclude this development or this building. I think we, all 7 of us, want to have a thriving community. I think all 7 of us can envision this beautiful area around the airport, people flying into, but I think we're getting ahead of ourselves now, and leaving this unzoned right now could, everybody always has the best intentions, but what if something happens while it's out in limbo?
How does this affect the church that's there? Nothing at all? No worries for them at all?
So
Maybe a
what-
silly question, but I thought
Commissioner Johnson?
So when so there's the land use study, and then from that, you will begin to craft the airport overlay.
Yeah,
So
another,
be conservative, but when do we think that will be concluded?
well, let's just make the assumption that by middle of summer, we can get the land use plan back to you. You know, we can put that item, the first thing on the agenda, and start working through it. You know, I wouldn't think that would take us more than a couple of months at best. You know, it may take us one meeting. It just depends on questions the planning board has and how comfortable they are with what we present along with what the airport, you know, wants or what FAA requires.
So, because I'm really struggling here with the equity issue as well as some other good points that have been made. But if we postponed this final zoning decision until the airport overlay was complete, because in a way, I guess in terms of fairness to the property owner, we're going to do that anyway at some point. We might not do it quite as fast, but there's going to be an overlay coming. So we're going to change the property to ENP, and then come the overlay. So it's kind of like they're going to get 2 changes. Nobody's fault. It's just the way it works. Everybody's doing their job. Everybody's doing a good job, as far as I can tell. But is that correct? Is that so? So there would be one set of if we rezone tonight, there'd be one set of criteria, and then when the overlay came, then it would shift to the overlay.
It possibly could. You know.
Or there'll be some changes, surely, even if we're not promising 106. I mean, we're not promising anything. And I think that's what we all have to be comfortable with in terms of this coming back. If this were a road that we went down, that the fact that this particular project does not fit in this overlay, that's not compelling to me. I mean, the compelling thing for me will be whether the overlay that's presenting is the right zoning for around the airport. Hopefully, they'll come together, but we've got to think about the land use prior to any particular project.
I mean, there's nothing to say that we won't be in the same situation we're standing here today, you know, 6 months from now, where, you know,
I hear you.
the airport, you know, authority says, hold on, we don't feel comfortable with allowing 140 or 150 or, you know, anything over 90-foot buildings.
Well, if they had some good reasons to back it up, I think we would hear those with open ears. If it's just kind of an arbitrary thing, then we might not be as receptive. If there's some public safety reason they have to back that up, I think nobody up here is going to vote for anything that's going to be contrary to that. But, I mean, I think I definitely have very mixed feelings about it too. I don't think I want to change my mind one more time tonight. But I mean, the challenge here is the airport's really important, but I mean, I think the airport is such a valuable asset that the economic development opportunities around the airport are really important. And so I think, you know, this is important. It's okay to take our time and make sure we get it right, because it's definitely one of the areas in the region that has some of the best potential for really high value economic development projects. I think we just want to make sure we're thinking that through. You know, and then also, you know, this is a new group, and so these are some of the first times we've really looked at this kind of zoning category, and I think we're kind of feeling our way through it as well. Just from at a high level, I mean, if we do have this employment zoning district, while you don't want to give carte blanche to build high-rises throughout Buncombe County, I mean, there are going to logically be a lot of different places where different height limits in areas that make sense for commercial intensive development, where height might be really appropriate or really not a good fit at all. And so I do think, just as a high-level thought, you know, coming up with some kind of recommendations where you don't require every property owner to get a variance, but maybe you do require some higher level of public, you know, either through the planning board or this board, to sign off on buildings that have a lot more height, does seem like something that's maybe worth putting that tool in the toolbox.
I was just asking Debbie, I couldn't recall of an incident where we have given a variance for height over 90 feet. I mean, I don't recall us ever doing that. I mean, it's not like this has been an issue in the past.
But it never is until that thing roll. I mean, I never heard about a 28-story building either until I was on city council and a developer came in and said, I want to build it right here, and we didn't know what to do about it. So I agree. I mean, there's not a lot of them, but when they come in, it's nice to have thought a little bit about it ahead of time.
But, you know, I mean, yeah, obviously we try to plan for everything that comes out there, but sometimes it just doesn't work that way. I mean, it's.
Go ahead.
I
Yes,
think
sir. Yeah.
I think I would feel comfortable, and I don't know if this is an option, I'd have to defer to the chairman, but if Mr. Summey and the airport had an opportunity to take their case to the planning board, to your planning board, and present this and go over this, because it seemed, you know, we all want the project, we don't want the airport hampered. It seems like zoning is an important issue, but overriding, would like to make sure this project is not hampered in the process. And if it's a matter of just giving him a set time, I don't know, you know, what kind of window Mr. Summey might be looking at on this, but anything that you know, consideration we might be able to do, you know, I would feel comfortable with that, if that's a possibility.
But it goes back to one more thing. We haven't held this that long, and he had the drawings of it when it was unzoned and at the 104, you know, with airport authority paperwork here. And the fact is that now we have it supposedly in our jurisdiction. We have totally changed his whole package just because our paper reads different. And that's the problem I have with it. You know, the 90 feet that we have, this is the airport. Airplanes take off. If you get it out of the flight path, Marriott stuff come in there, they may want to go higher, but they could go to Henderson County and them little bit. We need businesses over in Buncombe County, and I think that it was approved beforehand with him and the airport authority, and we need to figure out how to make this work for a while, just the way it sits.
Chairman Gale, if this is a question for you or for our attorney, but would it be possible to, because I don't want to postpone this indefinitely. I want finality around it, because I do believe it needs to be zoned. If we're without the overlay, so I guess my question is, can we postpone this decision until, I'm looking at Fru across the hall over there.
Well, and yeah.
Do we have to have a date certain, or?
Now, let me recognize Mike, and let me just kind of recast the history here. We had a motion, it was withdrawn. We had a second to the motion before it was withdrawn. We had what I think was a motion from Commissioner Belcher to refer to committee or to postpone. I didn't ask for a second because I thought it was better to have a full discussion of the merits of it. But I think we're all leaning for some legal advice here, so let me lean on you.
Well, two things. A, for the record, for the clerk, just to confirm with Commissioner Jones that you're okay with Commissioner Newman's withdrawal of his motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So look, just take a quick gander at the rules. I remember there's a difference between there's a 6-month provision and there's a 100-day provision. If you're voting to defer consideration, you put it off for 10 days or 100 days. If you want to prevent reconsideration of an issue, that goes for up to 6 months. So I don't know if it's going to be quite enough time in either case to do what you want to do, except just to say I would like to put this off to a date certain. and that'd be different.
That would be possible,
Yeah,
Deferred consideration.
if that's the
to a date certain.
desire of the board.
And,
And from Mr. Creighton's guess, August 1st or October? Yeah, September or October.
Well, and can't we direct the planning board to give this priority, work on this overlay and, you know,
It's, go ahead.
Go ahead. I mean,
Yeah.
the problem we run into is that the property's not zoned, so you really can't do an overlay over, you know. I mean, let's just say we assume that we're gonna do an overlay, but it's not zoned.
And
if
that's,
it's-
that's the real concern. I mean, we don't know if or when the project will ever go forward, but not just the physical zoning of this one particular parcel for this one particular project, but if you look at the whole can of worms, does the parcel support the project in terms of traffic, buffering, erosion control, stormwater, et cetera, which would all come into play, and some of it does come into play anyway, but it's a more particular process under the zoning statute. So, I mean, that's just a staff feeling that it needs to be zoned, but I understand that this board seems to be thinking that we don't have the particular zoning in place for this project now. We may not ever, but the planning board is working now on a new land use plan. And once that new land use plan is in place, then as Mr. Creighton was saying, then maybe we need to revisit this, and we might be having the same conversation in 6 or 8 months. We'd need to zone it something then, and then you would put in an overlay. An overlay doesn't come first.
right.
Right.
And, you know, where I'm at on this, it seems like this discussion is stepping to a bigger picture of our airport, our county, this building, other buildings, things that we can get excited about and that we all have to work together. And it seems like if we can take this out to the time when we do the overlay in the airport and all that, would be the time to really discuss this.
Well, it's like the question I asked, if you don't mind, Mr. Gant.
Sure.
Can I ask Mr. Sumney a question for an
Yeah,
answer?
I think that's appropriate. Mr. Summey, Mr. Mike Reisling, come back, y'all come back, and let's, if it's all right with the board, I'd use my discretion. Let's reopen any questions we have for either one of these gentlemen.
Mr. Sumney, you saw what I brought up. The fact is, I understand it wasn't zoned during the process of doing the 140 feet. Do you have any clue of an idea of how far it has to be stretched out before this project might start?
Any idea what?
How far this would be out before you might start this project?
No, and a lot of that would be determined by what the economy does. If the economy sits like it's done for the last 2 or 3 years, it'll probably still be there in 2 or 3 years. But eventually, things have got to turn around. Our whole goal with that, and you mentioned stormwater and all these other things, all that's taken care of. If you read the booklet in there, it's all parking. There's 432 on-site parking spaces. Stormwater, everything's been taken care of and calculated. And the way the marketing package was put together, we say in the marketing package that, you know, if we've got a tenant, we can start construction on this building without having to go through public hearings, without having, and this is important to, especially if we're looking to attract a major company to come here and bring a headquarters. They don't want to make a commitment based on, well, maybe we can do it. And that was one of the big selling points of this, is the fact that everything was done. If we get a commitment and we've got a signature on the dotted line, we're ready to go. We just have to go and, of course, meet the state building codes and all that we would have to comply with. As far as the airport, you know, we researched this very carefully before even proposing the thing. The height, I'll tell you how the height came about. The height was based on the number of parking spaces that would be required for a set amount of leasable footage and how many parking spaces we could provide on site. The design of the building was designed as such that it would be a very, very striking addition to Western North Carolina. It'd be the jewel of Western North Carolina, if we can get that in there. And the FAA approved about 20 feet more than what we asked for, because they said you may want to put a little tower or something on top of the light on. So
I guess the thing that I think we're all struggling with is no one wants to in any way damage the airport. We don't want to damage this project. And, but yet we want to be in compliance. And I think that's what I'm struggling with. We're all maybe struggling with is we don't want to have a vote that hurts the airport. We don't want to have a vote that hurts Mr. Summey's project. We'd like to see this project go forward. So this is the difficulty, and that's why I'm thinking if we could bounce this thing back to the planning board or somewhere to give time and do a much more thorough, investigation or review of this than we can give it here tonight.
Well, and then speaking of the planning board, when this issue came before the planning board, for some reason, I didn't get notice of that meeting. I think, I would have been there if I had. When the issue was brought up, I was not aware of that particular meeting that it was going to come up at, and so I was not there. And I guess it sailed right on through like it probably would have here if I hadn't have been here. I think the fact that most of you know me, I've been investing in properties here in Buncombe County over 40 years. I've never sold any piece of property I've ever had. I've owned this piece of property, I think, since '82, and been a pretty good steward of it over there. We've turned down a number of projects because we had a church across the street that I didn't want to put in front of a church. And we intend to continue to be good stewards of the property and to keep it. To keep a piece of property, if you can imagine, to keep a piece of property of this size mowed like a lawn for over 25 years for the community to use, we're not going to go do something that is going to be a detriment to Buncombe County or to the airport or anything else.
Okay, I have a question, Mr. Reisman. Mr. Reisman, let me speak to Mr. Reisman first. Mr. Reisman, what is the downside of if we deferred until we got a different zoning or had a little bit more time with the overlay issue and try to work? We want to accommodate. We want the airport. We want to accommodate FAA, of course. And I think there's some feeling that Mr. Summey has made good faith efforts to comply and do things. Although I will say it's a 7-year-old plan that expired December 21. The FAA approval expired about 5 years ago. So I assume it'd still be all right. But what's your view of leaving it open for a few months to let our planning board and our planning staff wrestle with this a little bit more?
Yeah, the county deferring action on this really has no negative or positive impact whatsoever really on the airport. The concern, of course, that the airport has is that as long as the property remains unzoned, there's always that potential for some incompatible land use to be proposed on it. The proposal that Mr. Sumney has provided for here, I would agree with some of the comments that some of the commissioners made earlier. It's a good-looking building. It's a compatible use with the airport. The problem with it is not that the airport doesn't have a problem with the height of the building, because the FAA determined previously it was acceptable. Assuming they would make that finding again, we have no problem with a 140-foot building. His problem is overcoming the challenges with the county's requirement, which has the 90-foot limitation on it right now. That's not a fight for the airport to be in the middle of, quite honestly. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, there is one thing that was kind of kicked around a little bit earlier that I do think requires some clarification for everyone's information. Several different people made some statements about how the FAA is going to trump any issues anyway. That is in fact not the case.
Okay.
The Federal Aviation Administration very specifically and very intentionally stays out of local zoning issues. What they do is they conduct these aeronautical studies. They look at these proposals from a compatibility standpoint and from a height zoning compatibility standpoint. They make a determination based upon their standards and their review. Should the county or the landowner or any other agency or entity that has control over that land elect not to comply with what the FAA's findings are, the FAA has no control whatsoever on prohibiting or keeping that from happening. It then falls upon the airport authority in this case to try and get an injunction or to take some kind of legal action to stop that if we feel it's necessary. Or, in a worst-case scenario, the airport is potentially faced with losing its eligibility for future federal funding because the grant assurances that the county attorney referenced earlier have been violated. All that being said, I'm not sure that we really see or really have any objection with what's being proposed on the property. We just understand, of course, that the zoning is something that we consider necessary in the future to ensure that the airport has the protection it needs to remain eligible for the federal funding projects that we have.
Okay.
One comment as far as the FAA goes, what we were told when we were going into this project, the gentleman's right about that the FAA doesn't get into the zoning issues of what kind of building and all you can have, but the FAA, I would take exception with him. I believe I'm right. The FAA can prohibit above a certain height within that cone of the airport. That's
No, what the FAA will do, again, is they will identify that the proposal penetrates or violates the airspace of the airport. And then again, based upon the federal grant assurances that the county has executed in the past, it's up to the county to ensure that they don't allow something that makes that penetration of that airspace. If the county elects not to do it, again, that's where the non-compliance issue comes in for the airport. And there are examples of that with other airports around the country where that has happened, and airports have been known to lose their federal funding status as a result of those things.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
I would
Okay.
point out also that
No,
the
thank you.
smokestacks up there at the power plant, I think exceed that height, and they're kind of in the, I have to dodge them when I come
Okay,
in out there.
all right, thank you, Mr. Summey.
I'll try a motion.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
So here's my thinking on it. So we do need to have a moment that this body votes on zoning of this property, up or down. It appears that perhaps, and that would indicate that to the airport and other bodies, that we are taking our land use seriously. So I would suggest that we postpone or reinstitute this motion or postpone this decision until October 1st of this year.
Let's ask the clerk what the first Tuesday in October is.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
right,
do you
that's-
know, whatever it is? That'll be the day and time certain, so. You're just asking to postpone until that
Yeah,
day
I
and
mean,
time,
but,
so.
and just in full disclosure, I do think at that point, we need to wrestle with up or down. And then we say yes or we say no, and then we move on. But that would be my motion tonight.
All right.
Second.
There's been a motion by Commissioner Jones, a second by Commissioner Belcher. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
No.
Motion carries 6-1. Frost, no. Thank you. Next, we have no county manager report. Dr. Green is very sick today. New business, we have election of vice chair. Are there any nominations?
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Commissioner Holly Jones to a 2-year term.
Okay, there's a nomination. Okay, can we do 2-year terms?
The statute provides that the first Monday of every December that the Board of Commissioners shall elect from among its members a vice chairman.
Is that we have an organizational meeting every year?
We do, and that's specific per the statute. And our bylaws essentially follow the language of the general statute.
So
Yes.
is it, okay, so there could not be a motion for 2 years, it has to be till the next organizational meeting?
Yes, sir. It'd have to be,
And when is I'm sorry, repeat, when is the organizational meeting?
it's statute 153A39, the first Monday in December of each year. First, since we have an elected chairman, it doesn't apply as to the chairman, but the board shall also at that time choose a vice chairman to act in the absence or disability of the chairman. So
But
that-
I thought, so it says, the amount thing, it says the first Monday in December following a general election. I'm okay with it either way, but I don't remember having an organizational meeting every year. I remember having it after an election.
If I'd had a heads up, I might have a quicker and easier answer. I do know that our current bylaws do provide that it is a yearly undertaking. There's no case notes under here, but I could give you a quick read if you want to give me a moment.
The commissioner's bylaws currently talk about 1 year? Well,
The first Monday in December, following a general election in which the county officials are elected, the board shall meet for newly elected members to take and subscribe to the oath of office as the first order of business. As the second order of business, the board shall elect a vice chairman from among its members.
so that's the
And I see-
following the election.
It does say following a general election.
Right, so that sounds like a biannual process,
Okay.
if I'm hearing that right. So,
It's every year, isn't it, Brandy?
Hmm?
It's every year. Once, they
It
can
has in
switch every
practice
year.
been, in practice, it has been every year, but
In-
I see
in-
your point from the reading. It does say.
that's been the practice, but the state law requires an organizational meeting following each election. Is that consistent with your understanding, Mr. Frew?
Yes.
Okay.
You have to have an organizational meeting following the general election.
Okay. Are there any other, there's a nomination for Commissioner Jones for a 2-year term. And is it your reading that this is or is not? I'll just tell you, I can cut this short. I do not favor a 2-year term. I think we should rotate it, and I would be in favor of that. So I will not support this motion. I do certainly support Commissioner Jones. So that would be my view of it. If we want to have a vote, I guess we can just have a vote on that. If there are not any more nominations for a 2-year term, whatever your legal advice is, I'll proceed.
Currently, we have a motion without a second and how the board wants to deal with
Okay.
that.
Is there a second to the motion to have a 2-year term for Commissioner Jones? Okay, if not, it dies for lack of a second.
I'll make a motion to nominate Commissioner Jones for a 1-year term.
I'll second it.
Okay. It's been a motion to nominate Commissioner Jones for a 1-year term by Commissioner Newman, a second by Commissioner Frost. Is there any other nominations? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Commissioner Jones is our new vice chair by a 7-0 vote.
Thank you.
Next, we have advertising delinquent, and I would say, just in my role as chairman, I think there has been a lot of talk. There has been, certainly there's difference of opinion about the rotation. I think my read is the majority of the board did talk about a rotation each year, and I guess that's what the vote was that time. So we will proceed, and she may or may not be reelected. That's up to the board in the organizational meeting. Thank you. Mr. Gary Roberts going to talk to us about the request for advertising delinquent real property tax liens and talk to us about that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, other commissioners, I do need to come to you tonight and request a date to advertise our tax liens. First, I'd like to give you our collection rate. As you know, we have 2 different tax levies we collect for. Our real estate and business collections are at 94% today, and our motor vehicle collections are at 75.67% collected. The total combined collection of the 2 are 93.12%, and which makes us about 0.5% ahead of this time last year. So our collections are very good, but one of the requirements of the general statutes is that county governments have to, or jurisdictions that collect their own tax, have to advertise real estate tax bills that are unpaid. This has to be done sometime between March 1st and June 30th. What Buncombe County would like to request to you is to advertise that on March 24th. We choose to do it a little bit earlier. The earlier we found in doing it helps people in paying their taxes a little sooner. My expectation of the number of real estate parcels that we'll advertise will be around 6,200. The total cost of mailing letters and to do the advertisement, we estimate to be around $8,500. In this amount of money, we do charge that back to people that we advertise their property tax bills in the newspaper, and it's estimated that the cost it will put back on these bills will be around $2.20.
In this, I'd just like to make the request that you allow us to do this on March 24th.
I have a question.
Sir, Mr. Belcher?
Is there other ways to meet this advertising requirement without it costing anything? For example, putting it on the website for a period of a number of hours. Is that legal, illegal? It's free?
Putting it on the website is allowed. It does not meet the general statute of it having to be advertised in a newspaper of general circulation. We have 2 newspapers in our community that meet that criteria, but it is a requirement that it has to be advertised. I agree with you. I don't personally think, from my years of experience, that the newspaper formality of running it is the bang for the buck, but we're required by general statutes until the legislators change that to put that. Now, we can scale down the size of the advertisement and things that go with that to get the least amount of cost to our citizens, but still meet the requirement if you'd like us to do that.
If there's any way you can save money, I'd be all for it.
We do
yes.
that. But now keep in mind that when we do the advertisement, the citizens that we advertise in a paper do pay that cost along with some of the notification of letters that we send out to them. So it is not a cost that the county has to pay. The county fronts that cost, and as we collect those real estate bills, we collect that advertisement back. Let me be real clear about that. So it does cost the county to do it, but we get the money back as we collect the tax bills. Our goal when coming back to you in June with the settlement, or July, will be that I'll be in the 99% collection rate. So we will get everything we could possibly can on this advertisement back.
Okay, any other questions? Is there a motion?
Do it.
Move that we accept this.
Okay, there's a motion by Commissioner King to accept the request for advertising delinquent real property tax liens as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Jones. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion carries 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Frew, we'll put you back in action to just go over the adoption of county rules and procedures.
Okay.
And we'll refer to the sheet if everybody has one or you have access to one in the agenda package. Mr. Frew.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, within the agenda packet, you do see current set of board rules with various yellow highlights to indicate parts of the bylaws that Wanda and I have discussed that we suggest this board look into. Of course, now we do have our full 7-member board, so county manager and the rest of us on senior leadership do need a number of these changes in place to help us organize and run and as a guide for procedure. First, I want to back up. I did go back and look at 153A39, and my opinion is that we've done the right thing. Our current board rules do indicate, as I stated, it says following a general election in which county officials are elected. However, the general statute in a roundabout way says every year, and it says that by saying on the first Monday in December of each even-numbered year and its first regular meeting in December of each odd-numbered year, the Board of Commissioners shall do X, Y, and Z, and one of those is to appoint from amongst its members a vice chairman.
Okay. And
Include that.
Okay. And Mr. Frew, if I could, and the board, if I could suggest, probably in the interest of time, why don't we vote on any change up or down as he goes through it, and then instead of doing them all at once and having to go back and talk about each one. So if that's good with the board, it might save us time and move along. Mr. Frew, go ahead.
Okay, I'll just start at the top of the agenda rules, and I know there's been a discussion about the beginning time of regular meetings, and it's currently set for a pre-session at 4:15. I don't know what the pleasure of the board is to continue or change that date.
Okay, is there any discussion of that? Anybody change one way or the other? Guess we don't change
Should
that.
leave it
Go
as
ahead.
is.
Next up.
Under Section 2A, just to make sure the board sees this, and this will be an amendment with your consensus. Second whole sentence, we've changed it. The person or persons who call the meeting shall cause a notice to be mailed, emailed, or delivered. The old rules said mailed, and we're talking about a special meeting, so just want to make sure we put that with current technology and make sure that if there's a special meeting called and notice has to get to the other board members at least 48 hours in advance, we can do it by mail, email, or delivering it to the house or any other method to expedite that service.
Okay, is there a discussion among the board about whether to change that to add the emailed?
That's fine.
Sounds good.
That's good.
Is there a motion to add the word emailed as presented in this document?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Jones. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner King. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. We will adopt the email, add email to Section 2A.
Very good. In Section 4 agenda, there's been discussion about how the chairman's role should be rolled into the current practice of the county manager setting and having general oversight over the agenda. There's been some discussion about buying with the consent of the chairman, or how would you like for that to be done? That's really a discussion from amongst the board members.
What's the pleasure of the board on that?
Moved at it.
Add the words by and with the consent of the chairman?
Yes.
Any other comments?
So what?
Any other discussion?
So that would include not just consenting, but also participating in the formation if you would like.
Yes,
Okay.
preparing the agenda, yes, yes. Okay, any other?
I think we would leave the rest of that language the same in that section of, in that particular section, because we'd still have to continue and do the stuff we do as staff by Tuesday and then post it by Wednesday. But there's other provisions on the next page regarding how many commissioners it might take to call or institute certain actions.
Okay, is the board comfortable with the, okay, we have a, let's see, a motion by Commissioner King and a second by, I think, Commissioner Jones to add by and with the consent of the chairman. Let's vote on that first, and then we may have another, I got another question.
Excuse me.
Any discussion of that? All those in favor of adding
Wait,
the?
can I just,
okay,
I
go
guess
ahead.
I just still, I'm just trying to kind of understand in kind of plain language, kind of what we mean. So, does this mean that essentially if the chairman wants to place an item on the agenda, because we got a thing on the next page about how many other commissioners could put something on the agenda, but does this make it clear if the chair wants to place an item on the agenda that's part of
Good
clear
question.
authority? So,
That does make good sense. I think what you're saying, Commissioner Newman, is that if this board is of mind that it's going to keep the current 2 to add items to the agenda, or do you want it to be 3 since we now have a 4-member majority? Does the chairman have a superposition to add items to the agenda by his new role as buying with the consent?
Right.
We could clarify that either way at the pleasure of the board. I mean, if you just say buying with the consent, we could say notwithstanding paragraph D and E of this same section. And if you'd allow me, I could tailor that and tweak that to say that it does not, either it does allow him to place items on the agenda unilaterally or it does not. I mean, that's as intended. I'll just draft something up.
I would be supportive of the chairman having that super function or super ability.
I would too.
Okay. Sarah, is that a motion then to, let's see, I guess you made the motion on David. Would you be comfortable adding that to your motion?
I think I'm still a little confused.
Okay.
I'm a little-
I guess
I'm a
we
little
got
confused.
two issues.
Well, yes, correct. I
Well,
mean, that
flaky on
was
this
Commissioner King's
Commissioner
motion
King's
to begin
motion.
with.
I think you got two issues. One of them, right now, the county manager sets the agenda, period. She does consult with us. We're not fussing, but there is no right of any of us to have input, other than 2 of us can put something on the agenda.
Okay.
That's the only authority we have at this point. I think there are 2 parts to this. One of them is the motion I heard from Commissioner King is to have whoever's sitting in the chairman's seat to be involved with the agenda up front. I think a second issue is should the chairman have the authority to put an agenda item on without. And I think Commissioner Newman raised it and said, well, it's a little bit vague when you say buying with the consent. Does that mean he can do it without the manager? And I think that's the second part of the issue.
And just looking ahead here, I think it might work to say if we're generally speaking of the county manager's role, and the county manager will hear from each of you from time to time and toy with the ideas of adding X, Y, and Z to the agenda. Now, some of those fizzle away, and some of them are the next thing on the agenda. If we're looking here, let's just think of Section A, I think, as the general agenda policy, just putting a general agenda together. If we're talking about the chair's power to add something to the agenda, let's look at the next page under E, where currently says any 2 members of the board may add an item to the agenda. And we could say the chairman or any 2 members or any 3 members.
So I'm supportive of the motion that Commissioner King made, and then maybe we can clarify this point when we get to that next.
Okay.
that
I mean,
next-
I understood this to mean that the chairman would take part, the chairman and the county manager would set the agenda.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
That's what we have now. We're going to get to the second part, is whether you want to give the authority to the chairman to put things on the agenda, I guess, without
My
consent.
understanding, this is chairman and county manager working in conjunction to, is that right?
Yes, that's the motion now, and
That's what
I read 4A. That's,
Sure,
and then we'll get to the second part later. I don't think this by itself, the way I read it, would not give the authority to the chairman to put something on without that additional thing that we're coming to in a minute.
Yeah,
Is
not
that-
not
It's a
alone.
little
Let's
vague, but
we'll look at that.
We'll add some more
Yeah.
clarity to it. in just a
Okay,
second.
yep.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So does everybody understand the motion?
Yeah.
The motion right now is that the chairman and the county manager get the, prepare the agenda.
Or we could say, it might make it more clear if the chairman's in trial all week or something, but it might just say, I don't know if we want to say with the consent either, but in cooperation with the chairman shall, it's up to the board, but that just struck me as maybe he's unavailable through no fault of his own.
I think,
Mr. Fryer?
I think in consent it's like he's talking, you could be in court, and Ms. Green, they're all working here all day. We're all supposedly trying to make a living. I think you ought to have something to do with it, but I don't think there ought to be a total tie in there. I understand you're our chairman, but I think we all are on the same basis. But but I'm not for. Well, I'm definitely not for putting something on. I think it takes 3 or 2 or whatever we decide to put something on or take something off.
Okay.
And but Ms. Green, I think Ms. Green, if she got it to you and you didn't like something of it, I think you're the first one should see it.
And that's why I backed off. I agree with Commissioner Fryer. Perhaps this in Section A should, the county manager as chief administrative officer in cooperation with the chair
Okay.
shall set the agenda.
Is that okay with
Change your amendment.
That leaves some flexibility.
I think so.
Okay. Is
I
that,
think that's good.
okay, any
Sounds great.
discussion of that? Everybody on the same page? So in cooperation with, and then we'll get to the second part in a
I
minute.
mean, it doesn't take anything away from the county manager's position.
Right.
But it doesn't surprise the
I-
chair, right?
I didn't hear
So
that,
the
sir.
chair doesn't get in a situation where the chair's surprised if we do this. I mean, the chair's.
Yeah,
plugged
we're
into
just
this.
saying in cooperation with, then,
exactly
you know,
right.
it makes it more even across the board of
Okay.
this commission.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of adding in cooperation with the chairman to 4A at the appropriate place, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That-
Next section, we're on 4 of the agenda. During the pre-session or prior to approval of the consent agenda, any blank number of commissioners may move an item from the consent agenda to new business for discussion.
Okay. Right now, it's
From consent to new business, it's 1.
one when we had a 5-member board.
Yes.
What's the pleasure of the board on that
How
now?
about 2, Mr. Gamp?
I would
2
agree with that.
suggested? Any other, a motion by Commissioner Fryer to do 2?
I'm supportive. One clarification on this, though. So if when we're talking about the consent agenda, any member of the board can still ask any questions they want during that. So if people have some clarification they need or need some more information, they can ask it. So the distinction here would be if someone says, well, I feel like I'd like to have a separate vote on that. That's really
That's what you're, yeah.
That's what this gets at, right? Is
Oh,
like, I would
yes.
like a separate vote on that item, so it doesn't get voted on as part of the rest of the package.
I would say it has two parts. The first part is a separate vote, but it also would be, I would presume that, and maybe Ms. Frew can help, that any questions would be in the pre-session, and we would not take time during the, or it's not take time, but we would not entertain discussion of the consent agenda during the actual meeting.
But during the pre-session, any member who has a question about an item on the consent agenda could bring it up then and get their questions
Yes,
answered.
I don't
Okay.
think that would change.
Absolutely. That's the job of the chair. One of the jobs of the chair is to make sure that discussion takes place during pre-session.
All this does, correct me if I'm wrong, is move it to two people, could move that to where the public would be part of it and hear it and all that,
Discussion.
right? It would be part of discussion.
They would have a presentation
Right.
versus the consent. Now, we just, when we approve the agenda, we automatically approve the consent items.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other discussion? Commissioner Fryer has made a motion for two commissioners to move it from consent to discussion item, or new
Second.
business.
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Belcher. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That is changed 7-0.
And moving to, one second. Okay, that takes care of that. Under Section E, this is what we were talking about a moment ago. Any blank number board members may add an item to the agenda. And just to clarify what the rest of the language should say, such request to have an item of business placed on the agenda must be received by the county manager no later than 1 week prior to the next regular meeting. We put those two phrases in there just to make sure it's consistent with what this board has talked about in terms
So-
of getting agenda items timely.
So would you put in there, given our discussion about the county manager in cooperation with the chairman, would you also have in there?
So
That-
this is separate. I
that's-
think I take A to mean they're just putting together the agenda, and the county manager's job is to make sure the chair's aware of how the agenda's shaping up and to get his input if he cares to give it. So that's that's with in cooperation with, so there may be feedback, there may not. So in this section here, I guess the idea would be that, say, the chair, or you want it to be any two other members, or any three other commissioners. Idea being before, a few years ago when we discussed it, it was a 5-member board, of course. If one member has something they really want but doesn't have any other support, maybe it doesn't belong on the agenda. If it's 2 on the prior board, it's getting awful serious. If it's 3 on the 7-member board, it's getting pretty serious too.
So I'd recommend that we go with 3, but then we also add language saying, notwithstanding that, the chairman may place items on the agenda at their discretion.
I'm good with that.
All right, there's been a motion by Commissioner Newman, a second by Commissioner Frost. Is there any discussion of that motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, no. That change is adopted. Mr. Freeman?
Let's see, Section 5, A and B. A involves.
Can I go back?
Yes.
1 week before the meeting, is that enough time for y'all?
I think so.
I mean, we only have 2 weeks between meetings normally, so unless we have a
Probably, yeah.
fifth Tuesday, but is that?
I guess, I mean, what I would ask is, I mean, I don't think this is gonna happen a lot, but I think that, you know, that is the polite thing to do, but if something were to come up and the agenda had not been published, that it could be entertained, I mean, so maybe we just have this is what we hope to do, but in the event that something came up timely and the agenda has not gone out, that there would be an opportunity, so, anyway.
Well, and one other point down that road, Commissioner Jones, I think, I don't see it on here, but I think any time, it's 5 now to put something on the agenda that's not been published. Is that right?
Unanimous vote.
Yeah, oh, it's unanimous.
was unanimous
So whatever, even
before,
with the
but it was
bigger board,
5.
you covered. Okay, that's why it's not on there.
That's still in
Okay.
there. It's unanimous vote, you can add an item to the agenda right now.
Okay, fine, that covers us, then we don't need to talk about that again. Okay,
So
next.
I think as
Cover that,
procedurally,
cover that,
following
too.
on Commissioner Jones, if there was an item that, 1 week, is that enough time? I mean, certainly we would have some discussion sometimes, that's not enough time. And so it might have to wait a week or two, but I think it
think-
should certainly at least 1 week.
A week is really reasonable, and I think, I mean, like, this is not gonna happen a lot, but I just, sometimes I don't want the rules to tie us down if we need to do something, so.
I
Mr.
think we
Fry?
ought to have 24 hours in that particular thing.
24 hours was
Instead of a crash deal,
unanimous.
yeah, unanimous, that you're gonna put it on the agenda then.
Well, sir, I think in practice, the county's a small world, but it's not that small. I mean, I can think of occasions when we're working on obtaining tower sites for IT for the new communication system. Sometimes the guy would say, we need a decision on this today. And I know we added a couple items on the agenda that day, on that Tuesday. It just,
Well, I wish that, it's time because the public needs to be
Right.
in part of
yeah,
it
I think certainly if we're asking the board by unanimous vote to put something on the agenda right now, we ought to have a pretty good reason.
Well,
And
I
you have
agree
to be
with that,
satisfied,
but I still
certainly.
think if we had a little time, or it could be put out so that the press or whoever could see what we're getting ready to do and not have to come in and pick it up,
Well,
figure it out.
could we word it, 24-hour notice unless emergency conditions? Would that be acceptable?
Well,
That's something.
you bring up a good point. I mean, I think we still have the rules for special called meetings 48 hours in advance. We still have the rule for an emergency meeting. We have an emergency, we need to deal with it. That's awfully rare. But a
Right.
special meeting still requires 48 hours notice.
Okay, well, this is still, I'm putting an agenda item on. I kind of hear where Commissioner Fryer's coming from.
Well, under these rules, we can do it if there's consensus, right? But only if there's all
Has to
seven
be
or four.
unanimous, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
That covered, okay. Yes, sir, go on there.
Under public comment on new business and old business, current rule says an item of new business that is as opposed to a public hearing. If it's a public hearing like tonight on a zoning change, then that's a public hearing by statute. We have to have a public hearing. But if we're having an item of new business that is not scheduled have public comment for whatever reason, then Gary's item a few moments ago was new business. The board could have asked for public comment in response to his request to publish the names. But if it's a new business item, the current rules say any 2 members can request that item receive public comment.
Okay, what's the pleasure, board? Do we want to change that?
Others that's kind of been practiced the last 4 years, do you kind of know, and if somebody came to you and said, I'd like to talk about this item on the agenda, and you knew that was happening in the public, you gave them the courtesy and said public.
Tried to.
So in some ways, I think the way we've done it in the past has been, I think we've been kind of loose on this one, which I'm good with, and so kind of say, I'd like to hear public comment on that one, you can just ask for it, as opposed to it having to be. So I guess I'm okay with this rule, but I'm wondering if in practice, if we could approach you beforehand and say, gosh, I really wanted to hear about that tax levy thing, so-and-so's here, and then you would just know that ahead of time and ask for public comment, as opposed to us having to do some type of formal thing at this bar at the time.
And I agree. I think in practice, that's the way it's happened. And then you automatically, but when you voice that, I guess, I don't know. The chairman could always say that I've had a request that we move this item up, and if you agree too as chair, then you already have your 2.
Right, and maybe that's what's been happening,
That
so.
work for people? Do it the way it is? Okay, next.
Okay. I had one thought this afternoon to add at the end of A and at the end of B, and that's in response to the emails we got over the weekend regarding the confusion some people might read into the public comment as it is a public comment period. But we've often had people that venture away from the item of topic under old or new business, and I thought that we might just consider including, as the board might consider saying, and comments are limited to the agenda item topic. Because I know that the chairman has to bring that up on occasion. You might still have to bring it up. So I just offer that as something to clarify that particular rule. Of course, public comment period at the end of the regular meeting is wide open. You can talk pretty much about whatever you want. But any comment that would be to new or old business should be focused on that item.
Okay, is there a feeling to add, to spell that out in this, or do we want to just continue with current practice?
Just continue with current practice.
Sounds like current practice wins.
You just have to be the police, Mr. Chairman.
All right,
So-
I'll try to be good, please.
Okay, just, but what, so where's the, I'm sorry, I'm skipping through here now. Where's the part where we talk about the public comment being at the beginning or the end of the meeting?
Oh, we'll get to that shortly.
We're working it, yeah, we're
Which
working.
number is that?
It's 13.
You're on 5 right now.
Yeah, we're on 5, it's 13.
Yeah, we're going
you're
to skip along
flying
pretty well here in a second.
We're a long ways off. Let's get through.
Well, I guess the reason I didn't notice it is because there's nothing currently highlighted there for making an adjustment on that. I mean, do we want to talk about that? Because these things kind of go hand in hand, right, in terms of.
Well, I had that discussion earlier. I mean, we'll just skip to 13, public comment. Now, that is a direction to the clerk to include a public comment period at the end of every regular board meeting. This board might want to move it to the beginning or the middle, but that's the direction. And so when you read the whole section A through G, it's directed to the public comment period that's held as a matter of statute at least once a month. So these are the rules that apply then. If we were to have public comment today during the tax levy thing, this board might say, I think we should limit this whole discussion to 30 seconds and let's vote. We might just limit it to 30 minutes. So there's just more discretion built in as to what rules you want to apply to those agenda items. And there's a few criteria, just order and decorum. The commission can set as a whole how much time is going to be allotted. And we don't have that for the public comment period. And in the past, I think it's just been the practice that the chair would ask for consensus of the board. How do you want to handle this matter for public comment during this agenda item?
Why don't we go ahead and jump to when we have public comment, since that's on the board. Is that, okay, a little bit out of order, but I guess it'd be page 13A. Right now, it says at the end of every meeting. Is that?
That's what it says, and the general statute says a board must have a public comment period once a month.
Okay. What's the feeling of the board on any change or keeping that where it is?
I'd like to see it in the beginning.
All right. Commissioner Frost has moved to change end to beginning. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Belcher. Any discussion?
I'd like to,
Mr. Farr, go ahead.
excuse me,
Go ahead.
I'd like to hear from the public side of it, the people that speak from the other end, whether they would like to see it the front or the back. I mean, there's a few people here I understand going to speak tonight, so.
One of the reasons why I said that I formerly spoke a lot in public comment and running a business, it was comfortable for me to know if I was here at a certain time and a specific time, it would be handled expediently. And then it was my choice whether or not to stay through the rest of the meeting. And I think everything should be done to encourage as much public comment as possible and making it as expedient. I know if I had my way, I'd love to have it at the beginning and at the end. But I don't know how popular that idea might be.
Well, on the opposite side of that is a lot of people don't get off at 4:30 and are able to come in here to be able to speak in that session before a session starts. So there's good and bads on both sides of it, the way I look at it.
There he is.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board? Do you want to get public input on this particular point?
Okay, do you want me to withdraw my second until we get the comments?
I think we
That's
can, I'd have discretion to go ahead and, would I not?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can open it for discussion. You don't have to withdraw it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm good. If y'all want to hear from the public on this particular issue before we vote on it?
Main things I want to see is hands, front or back.
Okay. Okay.
that's a great
Show of
idea.
hands. That sounds a good way to do it. All in favor of having public comment beforehand? And I'm going to give you three options, just so you know. You don't care before and after. Okay, and I'm not trying to be cute about it, but I think that'd be fair enough. All those in favor of before the meeting, raise your hand.
No.
That's not before us.
Let's,
Okay, let's go ahead and keep.
That'd be the fourth option.
We're going to do. Okay, I don't even mind doing that. Let's do
Four options.
Before, after, and before and after. Okay. All those in favor of before, raise your hand. All those after. Let's see, can clerk count, how many we got?
3.
3, and how many total here?
Four.
How many?
We had 4.
4.
4 out of how many people here? This wouldn't be accurate.
We still have one more choice.
Got
Just
one more
get a
choice.
finger in the wind here.
Okay, you count them.
You had 4 after.
Okay, and how many before and after? Okay.
4, interesting.
Okay. All right. The motion is to have our public comment before. Is there a second to that? I think
Commissioner Belcher, second.
Commissioner Belcher seconded. Okay. Any discussion of the motion?
I can say that the reason that I seconded that is because I thought it would be good for the public to be able to speak prior to those things that we discuss. So they would feel like that we weren't making decisions without their input. Didn't have anything to do with when you get on or off work, timing, or anything. That's why I seconded it.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I get, David, the
Yes,
other,
sir.
questions I have about this, would be if we make it if we make it at the end of the meeting, then essentially we stay here until everyone who would like to speak has their say, and then the meeting's done. If we place it at the beginning of the meeting, is that still the same case, or do we set aside a specific amount of time for it? Is that a question that we would need to, or is it just gonna be the same way regardless of whether it's the beginning or the end, or?
I think it'd be the same way, and I think it's just till people are through talking.
That's right.
Okay.
Well, that's the pleasure of the board. I do know a number of other counties and municipalities that, whether it's at the beginning or end, they say that we're going to have 30 minutes of public comment, and that's it, and they make people sign up prior. We've never had, this board has never required anybody to sign up prior to speaking on any item, but that's a common practice. It's also very common practice to say whether the public comment is before or after the meeting, that it's going to be limited to 30 minutes of time. Now, there certainly may be some especially contentious items on the board, before the board, but and I'll just offer this as for discussion, if public comment was limited to 30 minutes, I'm certain that particular item before the board as an agenda item would be wide open for public comment for some period of time during your regular meeting. So there's a number of ways to do that.
Right now, our rule is there is no time limit, and they don't have to sign up.
Correct.
Okay. I'm kind of good keeping it that way. I think people ought to have their say, and I think I'd support it being before. And I would say if you wanted before and after, you'd probably vote against this. So, but I think before, it's always the argument, I want to tell you what you need to do before you vote versus I want to kind of fuss at you or congratulate you after you vote. And I see both sides. I think both sides are valid. I'm good with before. So is there any other discussion?
Just before.
Yes. Yeah, just before is what I would.
It's just a
support.
question, if we moved it to the before, though, we would limit it to someone talking on a subject one time, so they wouldn't, in other words, if you had a lot to say about the tax levies at the beginning, and then we had the conversation, and then there was an open comment, and you couldn't come up again and talk again.
Well, that would be a board decision. I would say they could, though.
That's certainly what makes the point that we got from the email over the weekend. If this board has never felt compelled to deny a person an opportunity to speak, even if they've already spoken during a public hearing, because this is public comment and, this is water under the bridge. But I can see how that would come into play. And remember, these rules are modeled on the School of Government rules, and so they're as broad as they can be, but within the statute. So if you are going to have comment at the beginning of the meeting, I would just caution the board that, and the chair in particular, that you may run across the situation where you have to say, you took your 3 minutes on the same topic during the agenda item, or 8 of you rose your hand and you took 10 minutes or you might later, but you might have to limit what you've already heard.
Well, and toward that point, I would point out that, to go to Commissioner Jones's point, if someone spoke on the tax levy at public comment and then it came up and they wanted to speak again, and the chair said, no, you've already spoken on it, there would not be any additional information they would have at the time we did public comment, because let's see, there might be, I guess they would hear Mr. Roberts, though. That's not probably right. I guess they could hear, I guess I'm thinking the order of things, they would not get the benefit of the commissioner's comments, because that would be after any public comment.
Aren't we now, when we have a given issue, just like with one with Mr. Summey, people have an opportunity to speak before, assuming we had voted on that, and then we have public comment at the end. Now we're going to have public comment in the beginning, we'll have comment throughout the thing, and then public comment at the end. Is that correct?
No.
No.
No, there would not be public comment at the end under this motion, as I understood it.
Okay.
It would be public comment, and I think the issue Commissioner Jones raised was, well, if somebody got up and said the exact topic that's coming up later, would we give them two opportunities? And I think her interpretation was you wouldn't. And
Unless they had something new based on the data that was
Right.
presented by the presenter.
Okay, so I'm going over to this conversation here with Commissioner Jones. I can understand that if you have it at the beginning, and then there's more, then all of a sudden there's some discussion up here, and from you or whoever, and it enlightens you, and you have another question, then maybe you should ask it at the end.
Could
The
we-
worst case is it's another 3 minutes from that one person. You can't give somebody, I mean, but, you know, David's looking at me like there'd be 100 out there, but I don't know. I mean, you know,
Could-
I don't know.
Could we leave a little leeway, and if the chair, and leave it to his discretion?
I'm good with that. If someone got up and said the exact same thing because they were passionate about it, I think it would be appropriate to say, the chair would have the authority to say, is there any new information? We did hear from you earlier, and that would be, I think that would be within the chair's jurisdiction.
And from my perspective as county attorney, I just know that this is the exact reason many counties get fed up and say, we're going to have a 30-minute rule and you're going to have to sign up too. So I would be very reluctant to advise that ever. But if there's going to be a lot of public comment before and during an item, I would just suggest to the board that you're going to have to grin and bear it, because that's, you know, we know that's going to happen on occasion.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Yes, sir, Commissioner Fry?
I think at the end, and I can be wrong, but at the end, we have an agenda and the tax deal comes forward. The people get to speak during that. They get their say-so out there. But when it gets to the last 3 minutes or in the public, that they bring something else forward, so you're not doubling up with them coming back during, like if it's on the agenda, they speak first about the issue, then they come back with something else in that issue that we're letting them do it. The other way, they can come up for the issue, and at the end, the issue is gone, so they can come forward with something else at the end of the meeting. Because once we voted, it's over, you know.
So you're saying the public comment at the end would be for those that want to speak to something other than what has
As long as
what
the
has
stuff
already
is
been
not
passed?
on the consent agenda and we're putting it out there for the public to speak on, they're going to understand if it's whoever in the room, period, that simple fact is they can speak on it at that time, and then at the end of the meeting, if they have something else that they want to talk about, they can bring that forward without bringing that forward at the first of the meeting in 3 minutes. Then if we let them speak, they've got another 3 minutes, that's 6 minutes they're burning on one thing.
Don't we do this already? I mean, on the issues, people get to speak, and then there's a comment section at the end. I mean, don't we already do this?
Pretty much. I would say that's been our practice. Would you agree, Madam Clerk?
But I thought that what we did was that if they had, maybe I'm wrong, but that if they did speak during the course of conducting business, that they wouldn't speak on it again at the end of the meeting.
Is that what we're not doing?
That's the way the city does it. That's not the way it's been over here.
I would probably,
I mean, you would know, not me. I mean,
well, no, I think generally it's pretty wide open public comment, even if they spoke on it before. I think most people usually don't say the exact same thing, but there have been
It's
variations
listed.
of pretty close to pretty
Okay.
much the same thing. So
Okay.
I can remember some instances where I'm thinking I've heard this before, but I think we've tried to be.
I think that's where you ought to have some control, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
So do Do we need to redo our motion?
Well, right now, the motion, as I understand it, is there's a motion to move the public comment to the beginning
Yes.
of the meeting. And there was a motion, a second, and we're discussing that now. And
Yes,
there
sir.
was a request by Commissioner Fryer to poll the audience, which we did, with the three options, before, after, and then both. So, Commissioner Newman.
Yeah, I guess I still have one clarification in terms of what our expectations are for how much public comment there's going to be on the different agenda items on, over the course of a meeting. I mean, we just voted on this a second ago to say that for items that are new business, it's going to take 2 members of this board to specifically authorize public comment on new business items. So unless that happens, the rule we're adopting here is that there is no public comment on items that are new business. And then did we get to the old business one yet? Did we do that one yet?
No, we haven't gotten to that
So
one.
we're
yet.
about to get there. I assume it'll be at least that hard, if not harder, under old business, because,
I think so.
so I guess,
You're saying it's not gonna be an issue very much.
well, I guess what I'd like to just, regardless of what exactly we vote on, is it the expectation that when folks come to a county commissioner meeting, let's say they've read something in the paper, there's some item on the agenda that brought them here, they're not just the diehard folks who are, who are following everything. Are we basically saying to them, if we move this to the beginning of the meeting, our expectation is that you will provide your comment at the beginning of the meeting, because there is no guaranteed provision that you're going to get to speak on it when we actually get to it in the meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And I
that's-
think and then it's up to 2 commissioners to say, no, I want to hear that
We're going to do even more.
Yes.
I'd like
But
to hear more.
but that shouldn't be considered a routine thing. The routine is that make your comments at the beginning, and that's the main place for it.
And that's the way it is now, pretty much, but it's on the back end. It's just when it
I'm-
is.
I'm-
But yeah, good
Narrowing it
concept,
down.
good
Okay.
analysis of it.
And this
Right.
this gives
Okay.
them the option to leave. They don't have to sit here until the.
That's right.
That's, another reason is they don't have to sit here. If they don't want to sit here.
I mean,
if
I
you want to
can't
sit here,
imagine
you
people
can, but if you
not
don't,
wanting to
you can
sit here
go.
the whole time to hear this, but
Okay. Any other discussion? The motion is to move public comment to the beginning of the meetings.
As long as there's no public comment at the end.
Well, right now, the motion is just
Yep.
to
Say what
do
they want
that,
to.
and someone can make another motion. I think this is going to resolve it, though.
Right. You're on.
Okay. So does everybody understand? The motion is move public comment to the beginning of the meeting.
Yes.
yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That
Definitely
motion
that.
is adopted 7-0.
And I'll just repeat one more time. And if we, on an item of new business, we have 2 commissioners that want to have public comment on a particular item, it is at that time the board can discuss what time limitations it might want to impose on that item.
That's good.
I could
That
turn to
works.
Commissioner Newman and say, I'd like to hear more about this. What about you?
So one other thing I might just throw out is just kind of a, maybe just something to think about to kind of make things more efficient. I mean, if there's some big issue that we all know is going to be a big issue, I mean, maybe if there's 2 folks who know they want to have public comment, maybe at the beginning of the meeting, we could just kind of announce, like, there's going to be public comment on such and such, so that we don't kind of get in the, like, we talk about it once and then we talk about it again. But I'm happy with the rule we've adopted, so.
That's a good way to do it.
Sounds good.
On to old business. The current rule is that the old rule of 5-member board was any 2 members could bring up an item of old business and request public comment. Do you want 2 or do you want more?
Pleasure of the board.
What's he talking
Which
about?
one, for the old
This is for
business?
old business. For new business, I think we've said
2.
2.
To Mr. Newman's point earlier, Commissioner Newman, it should be a little harder to bring back the old business than the new business, so I would recommend 3.
I'll second that.
Motion by Commissioner Belcher for 3 at item 5B, second by Commissioner King. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That is adopted 7-0.
The next yellow is under pledge and prayer. Pledge and prayer currently is not an official part of the agenda. A number of ways to do it, and we could be here for the next week and a half if we wanted to go to all the intricacies. But right now, as we know, the chairman has been doing the invocation at the beginning. And I don't know if the board wants to rotate. I don't know if you want to hear my recommendations or propose any rules. We currently, as of several years ago, we put in an unwritten policy, but it is an unwritten policy based on Supreme Court decisions and Fourth Circuit precedent in the courts.
Tightly regulated on that one, I believe, by the Supreme Court.
Yes.
So why can't we move forward that it just says we have pledge and prayer? And then we'll
We certainly
determine it.
can. I mean, it's just not written in there. We can leave it the way it is and just proceed on. But we just had the opportunity to have discussed or not at this time, because it is a part of this process, whether we put it in there or not by practice.
Can I make a motion that the chair say the pledge and the prayer?
That's fine. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I would, yeah. I think there probably should be more I think if you leave it the way it is, then it leaves it open to the board's discretion regarding that person that may decide to lead the pledge or the prayer. It's very simple, it's very generic, we don't have to. So I think and I'm only saying that maybe this second may come a little bit soon and requires a little discussion. The way it's written right here is very simple, very, very clear. It doesn't require, you breaking out the law book and telling us what the law says. It says pledge and prayer. Let's move on, keep it simple. So far, the chair has been doing that and doing a very good job at it. So, but it keeps it very simple and very open instead of us getting into, there'll be a lot of opinions on that if we get into that. And there'll be a lot of concern if we start trying to legislate a particular person to do that. I would be concerned about that.
And yes,
And
certainly.
that is absolutely no reflection on our chair.
And if you're Commissioner Belcher, if you're suggesting that we leave the practice as is, then let's ask Commissioner Frost if she would amend her motion to that.
I'll make my motion to leave it as it is.
And I would second her motion.
Are you agreeable with that,
I'm
Chairman?
I'll amend my
Mr. King.
second.
Everybody's
There's a
amending.
lot going on.
Everybody's in amending mode. That's good.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so let's leave it the way it is now. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no.
I think we did public comment. We'll do that at the beginning. And I might just suggest that to clarify the title to section 13, let's just change the title to public comment period. So then we know it's these rules in this section only that apply to this section, and that the board will reach a consensus as to how it wants to proceed on any other items brought for public hearing or simply public comment.
And that would satisfy the
I think it does clarify that one,
question
that one issue.
Ms. Leslie brought. Okay, good. All right.
The last one I got is there's been some concern about broadcasting and recording of the meetings and in this new chambers where the cameras would be allowed. Now, right now, it's an unwritten rule. We don't have any formal policy. We've asked that they all stay in the back of the room. I have asked some security staff and EMS what they want to see, and it's what you would suspect. I mean, we have 2 exits over there, so we certainly cannot have a rule that could allow for those passages to be blocked. The only suggestion I would have would say that the designated area perhaps should remain in the back of the room, but certainly with the policing of the deputy sheriffs, if they want to come up and take a couple shots of me or whoever's presenting at a particular time from a better angle, they could move temporarily. But I think that'd just be a practice. But I think speaking to security and EMS, perhaps the best location for a designated location remains back there, but it's okay to move as long as they just don't set up shop over there near the exit aisle or near the exits.
All right. Commissioner Pryor?
I disagree with that. We've got 2 doors, exit doors, but we got a storage door over here, and we've got a wall right there. WLOS came to that wall and set their camera up, and at least they could film you or whoever, Gary Roberts that was standing there. I think that area right there, because it is behind the wall, should be open for cameras, and that way they can get the commissioners. They're not 60 foot away. And the gentleman that's here back there, he's stood close to you for a lot of years, so I don't think he's going to do anything, but he's kind of be hidden behind that wall.
And for clarity, I just want to clarify in my mind what Commissioner Fryer is suggesting. You're saying a camera near that pillar over there?
That area, because those two doors there are closets. That's all they are. And somebody can move to that point and they can film from there, and they can actually film and pick up you talking over there because he's looking at your back at the present time. That camera up there is getting you from here, but any news reporter or anything else, if they set up over there, it's not going to bother the audience because we got all this space up here. And once they come through the door, we have to have some trust.
Yes, sir, I agree with that. And just for discussion for the board as a whole, I think that the only issue may come, I mean, how many would be allowed in this particular area over there? And that's the discussion I had with EMS and security, but maybe we need more input from EMS and security on that regard. But certainly there's room for one or two, but how many, I don't know.
I've been coming for a long time, and I've never seen over 3. And that still gives it plenty of room within that area.
Yeah, and it would seem to me that if you were going to try to film anything, it'd be really difficult back there, all the way in the back. And I don't think it works over there. It seems like that's an ideal place for people to be able to do something like that. But as far as the policing of it, I guess that's what they're here for.
Well, how about, are you suggesting that we do like a measurement like 10 feet from the pillar or something, or some specific, or is it,
You don't
how
have to be that
specific
far.
do we want to get?
I don't know. I being a lawyer, I just naturally hedge. I think if we're going to say that we want to designate a particular
Yes, I
area.
went to Hedge 101 when I was.
I think if we
Same
want
law
to
school,
designate a
actually.
particular area near the front or near the side, I would suggest that we just consult with security and public safety personnel. If they say okay, then, it's okay.
Okay, is it okay to just put off till we talk? I'm good, and I'm good to have them right anywhere they want to go, pretty much. But
Yeah.
why don't we
Yeah, I
just
think
let's
that's fine.
touch base with them and just get a
Right.
final. If we can instruct the county attorney to talk and talk with our wonderful security and sheriff and
I'll get
EMS,
that information.
There's
and then
plenty.
just bring that back on next week. Is that all right?
Put some blue tape down and we'll move on.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And that's all I got.
All
Wait,
righty.
let me check, thinking out loud later in the day, which is sometimes dangerous. I mean, we're going to kick into a cycle now where we're having elections every 2 years. Discussing earlier today with some others, do we want to rotate board appointments every 2 years? Because before, of course, there'd been no question to bring it up for 4 years because everyone got elected every 4 years. Is that something that needs to be revisited every 2 years following the elections?
Are we going from 4 to 2? Is that what? Or
Yes.
Well, because of the, I think we're saying because of the staggered term, there'll be probably 3 to 4 changes every 2 years.
Correct.
And-
3
and that's
in
different than everybody getting
2014,
elected
we'll
all
have
at
4 in
once.
2016.
So we did 4 years. We had an informal policy, if I recall, that only the people could serve 2 terms without a specific articulation why they get more. And I remember I brought that up one time because people were serving real long, and I thought it's okay if there's some specific reason, but we should tell the public why this person stayed on more than 2 terms. So what's the pleasure of the board on the 2-year versus 4-year term, Mr. Moore?
That makes sense.
Are you
Well, just for
talking
clarity, are you
about
talking
us?
about us or are you talking about citizens?
No, our appointments to the board, I believe. That's
Our
what-
appointment of citizens to serve on citizen boards, not our
No,
appointment of
no.
commissioners to serve on.
I was thinking both, but.
Well, actually, it would just be a matter of law with someone, it would be a matter of law.
Some of
if
them
they-
are a matter of law. If any of the 2-year commissioners aren't elected in 2 years, then we're going to have to make a switch. So some of them will take care of it that way. But should it be fair game for the whole new batch of the whole new commission? Because we're going to have a whole new commission every 2 years.
Well,
Maybe not.
I mean, all 7, no, I mean, let me rephrase that. All 7 may remain. However, it's a new commission once the swearing in and organizational meeting occurs. Like Congress.
I really think you should have put that in yellow on here so I could have worked on it before. No, I'm just kidding.
well, and also, I did want to bring up, I think there was not an expectation, but a presumption that if someone was doing the job, they could serve up to 8 years, which if we did 2-year terms, that would be a little bit different. It'd be 4 2-year terms instead of 2 4-year terms. So it's what the board wants to do. That was kind of a, was that spelled out that we had 2 years? Or we just kind of said this gentleman's agreement, we're going to do it this way? Okay. I
It's
didn't
just
know if
been
that-
an every 4-year thing.
Okay.
No specific rule though. Now,
All right.
we can just play it by ear. I just thought I'd throw it out.
Well, one advantage of it is would allow you to rotate, between boards for more experience.
Right.
And you wouldn't have just allow you to rotate sooner.
And you're referring to commissioners and
Yeah.
the other?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, for myself.
And I'm just talking about commissioners right now, so.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, you want to break it in two parts. Let's talk about
Yeah,
commissioners.
Other boards are usually governed by their individual boards as to what the terms are.
Okay.
Each individual board has some for 3, some for 4, some for 1, some for 6. It's governed by that particular board. But you guys, if you were appointed as a commissioner, it's always been you served as long as you were.
Pretty much, yes, yes, that is true. Yeah, because there have been times, and the thinking there, I'll just give you from past boards, the thinking was, well, if you were elected, you've passed that muster, and so if people, we will respect that and let you serve as long as you want, basically, and some people did serve pretty long terms. The downside, of course, is you're not switching over.
But you could though, if someone came in and they wanted to be part of that board and you could serve less than
You could,
your term.
yes.
Okay. So you could rotate if you.
And I'll just toss it was with 5 people, now we have 7, so we have more.
Well,
So,
fine.
let's talk about commissioners. How do we want to do the commissioner appointments? And then we'll get to the non-commissioner appointments.
I feel like it should be 2 years.
I think
And,
so, that-
and the main argument I would make is that we do have an election every 2 years, and I think the board, following an election, has the right to decide who represents that board in its different official capacities. And so, I think in all likelihood, when somebody gets on a board and if they're reelected and they want to keep serving, probably the board will probably most of the time it'll just kind of continue that way.
Right.
But it does seem like the board should have the option of kind of making
Right.
those decisions if there's a new board elected, and so that'd be my suggestion.
All right, I'll take that as a motion to move the commissioner appointments for commissioner spots to 2 years. Is there any further, is there a second to
I'll
that?
second.
Second by Commissioner Frost. Is there any further discussion? And I take it your motion in second is not to put term limits, or just,
No.
that would be up to.
No
but
term,
each-
no term limits,
Right.
but that
Just
the
like
the
reappointment
appointments
or-
have 2-year terms that can renew at the board's discretion.
Okay. Okay, any
And
other
it-
questions? Yes, ma'am.
Not about that, I had a question about the other.
Okay,
Scenario.
all right, on the commissioner, the motion is for the commissioner appointments to commissioner spots, or I guess non-commissioner, any appointments for commissioners it would be, not necessarily for one.
Except as Kathy pointed out, unless the rules of that particular board provide otherwise.
Okay.
Because they may.
Well, and we couldn't change their rules. But to be 2 years, there's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion of that point for commissioners only at this point? Okay, all those in favor of changing the rules, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion is adopted 7-0. Okay, now let's have the discussion on non-commissioner appointments. Again, same issue. You potentially could get 3 to 4 new members, change the board, chemistry, thought, philosophy, et cetera.
And that suddenly worries me if we were talking about situations where we're talking about the Board of Equalization Review, health board members, Board of Adjustment members, property, all the boards. Boards may have rights and an expectation that they're going to remain, and so do the citizens have an expectation in those board members. And this board can appear in many instances to get rid of board members that they may perceive as being adverse to their interests. So let's study that, or ignore that second aspect for now and leave that the way it is, because
Okay.
that could open a can of worms.
Mr. Frost?
Wouldn't all the boards that we're talking about have their certain set of bylaws and statutes, so we would go accordance with?
They do, and you also have another set of rules that govern your board appointments that you might want to review at some point.
But, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I do.
Try to get into the mic if you can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I'm sorry.
I apologize. I mean, for example, there is an entity that does not have term limits. And I'm not necessarily okay with somebody being on the board forever, just because there's not rules that, ever take them off. So I would always want to defer to those rules unless it goes over, because I think that this is a big county with a lot of talent and a lot of people with a lot of different perspectives, and I don't think that we really utilize that full pool in our community. I think we know who we know, and we like who we like, and for good reasons, because they do a great job, but I think this would help us to expand our horizons. So I just wanted to point that out, that while there are rules, sometimes those rules might not be the best thing for our board. Now, if they trump us, that's a different thing.
Well,
But we don't have to reappoint somebody just because there's no term limits.
Well, when they're a separate legal entity, we can't
Right.
trump them. But if it's one of our boards, Board of Equalization Review, Board of Adjustment, Planning Board, we trump them. But there's a certain expectation that members of the Board of Adjustment are going to stay there. You're not just going to boot them off because there's a vote coming up next week and you think you know how they're going to vote.
Right. But I don't think that people should just assume that you get reappointment, unless you've shown up and worked hard and, and been a team player. I mean, so I do think there's a bar of behavior that people
And
need.
there is
There
a
actually
current,
is a bar
there
now.
is a current set of rules to that effect. You have to make sure you make.
If you could email us
So
those.
that
'cause
might be for another time.
Yes. Yeah, well, I'd say if it's comfortable with the board, we can. Okay, and that might be maybe put that on our next agenda then, that while we're kind of on
Right.
this mode, and have a little time to think about it, because there are some other issues, as Commissioner Jones pointed out. Okay, that's all Mr. Frew has. Anybody else have any rules, while we got it on the table, while we got it out here? Anything else? Okay. And we're on board appointments. Thank you, Mr. Frew. That was tedious and very
I will-
lawyerly. You did a
I
good
will-
job.
Good
Thank
job.
you.
Are we moving ahead?
Board appointments, yes, ma'am.
Okay, I will happily nominate Commissioner Fryer for the Audit Committee.
Okay, are there any other nominations? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Commissioner Fryer is appointed. Juvenile Crime Prevention Council.
I'd like to nominate Ellen Frost.
Okay, are there any other nominations? All those in favor of Commissioner Frost say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Commissioner Frost is appointed. Land of Sky Regional Council.
I move Ellen Frost represent us on the Land of Sky Regional Council.
Are there any other nominations? All those in favor of Commissioner Frost to represent us on Land of Sky Regional Council, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Commissioner Frost is appointed. Economic Development Coalition.
I move that we nominate David King for that position.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second for David King. Are there any other nominations? All those in favor of appointing Commissioner King, say aye.
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 All opposed, no. Commissioner King is appointed 7-0. Land Sky Regional Council, RPO Transportation Advisory Committee.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Newman.
Okay, Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Newman have been nominated for the two spots. Are there any other nominations? All those in favor of appointing those individuals, say aye.
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 All opposed, no. Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Newman are appointed. TDA, Tourism Development Authority.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Belcher.
Commissioner Belcher has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? All those in favor of appointing Commissioner Belcher, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Commissioner Belcher is appointed. Health and Human Services Board.
I'd like to nominate David King.
Commissioner King has been nominated. Are there any other nominations to that board? All those in favor of Commissioner King, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Commissioner King is appointed. Riverfront Redevelopment Board. Are there any nominations? We will continue that one. Smart Start Board. Any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Ms. Frost, represent.
Commissioner Frost has been nominated for the Smart Start Board. Any other nominations? All those in favor of appointing Commissioner Frost, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Commissioner Frost is appointed. Business Improvement District. Any nominations? Okay, we will continue.
Does that one require that we have a commissioner on it, or?
Recommended, not required.
Recommend not require, okay. just-
Councilman
we'll think
Davis,
about
I
it.
think, serves on that one, I believe. And they ask us to appoint a commissioner.
Okay.
But not required.
Okay.
Okay, we'll hold that one open. Crime Stoppers, Board of Directors, 1 Commissioner Liaison.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Frost.
Okay, Commissioner Frost has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Commissioner Frost is appointed. Board of Equalization and Review. There are 5 vacancies. Are there any nominations?
I move that we appoint or reappoint Mark Morris, Jim Edmonds, Kendall Wright, Jerome Jones, and Brad Freeman.
Okay,
Second.
any other nominations?
Sorry.
All those in favor of Morris, Edmonds, Wright, Jones, and Freeman, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Asheville Transit Commission. Any nominations?
Lamar Blair.
Lennar Blair has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? That's 1 spot, I believe. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. Any other nominations? Hearing none. All those in favor of Lamar Blair, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Mr. Blair is appointed. Okay. Announcements. The next regular board meeting will be February 19, beginning at 4:30. But our rules say 4:15. I take it that's our pre-session starts at 4:15. 4:30 with a pre-session at 4:15 at our Commissioner Chambers, 200 College Street, room 326 in downtown Asheville. The board will hold a workshop on February 12, beginning at 4:30 to hear from local nonprofit groups. Commissioner meetings can be seen on BCTV Charter Cable Channel 2, ATT Uverse Channel 99, live on buncombecounty.org during the meetings, or online anytime at buncombecounty.org. The official county business is concluded and will now hold public comment. The time limit for any comment is limited to 3 minutes. If your time expires, you can leave questions along with your name, address, and phone number with the county manager. Board members are not expected to comment on matters during public comment. Comments should be limited to subjects that are within the jurisdiction of this commission or pertain to matters upon which we may act. Any individual speaking during public comment shall address the entire board. Any polling of board members is inappropriate. Persons addressing the commission are expected to observe the decorum of the chamber and to be respectful of everyone in the room. Any person who willfully interrupts, disturbs, disrupts the session will be asked to leave the meeting, and the commission reserves the right to deny public address on any subject previously presented. I would like to enter, per our discussion, the petition circulated by, Mr. Davis, I believe, concerning the SROs as part of the record, if that would be appropriate with the board.
Fields.
Mr. Mark Fields. I think it was over 400 signatures that he had on. I think everyone's gotten a copy of that. So if we could attach that as part of public comment. And Mr. Frew, we're going to have I think you've already indicated we do have a closed session tonight.
Yes, sir, we do pursuant to General Statute 143, 318, 11A4, Economic Development Matter. Just need some direction from the board, anticipate no action after
Okay.
closed session.
Then we're ready for public comment. Any members of the public want to be heard? Mr. Rice.
Lane here.
Mr. Rice will be first, ma'am. Come on in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Public comment, it needs to be before and it needs to be after. Because there's all kinds of comment that you can say on things. It does not get into the agenda packet. The agenda packet is so slim and trim, you even have to ask your own staff what they're talking about. So then that limits us. If we try to say something at the front, we could be wrong about it. Then that takes up additional time. Then we have to listen to another argument about the staff, what they're talking about. Then at the end of the meeting, then we are not able to comment on it. Then it might be an item that's carried over to the next week, but if we don't get her say this week, we might not be here next week. So it just don't make sense. I would rather see a comment on every item on the agenda, just like the city does, and give a little time for discussion. I know I've been here for 20 years, and you all see me as a regular, but I'm going to be here for 20 more if the Lord lets me live, and I'll be up here when everybody's replaced. But that's not the point. The point is the voters put you in, and the voters needs to give an opportunity. You can sound like you're doing a good job, or you want to do a good job. I commend you for what you're trying to do, but you're not doing a good enough job. You need to do it to where we can have an open session to talk about these issues. 3 minutes don't give me enough time. People talked about me complaining all the time. Well, if I complain for 3 minutes and you can sit up there for hours and we just get to complain for 3, then add 3 minutes up over this many meetings twice a month and see how much I complain. If you go to the city, you'd have a respect for the voters of the county a lot more if you go to the city and listen to the city folks complain. The city people get to say in their meetings, they really get heard, don't they, Mr. Newman and Ms. Jones? I respect you for giving an opportunity to the city when you were there, and they're there now. And the county is trying to shut us up and shut us down, and I think you need to stand up to the public and give us an opportunity here. And I've been around here long enough to tell you that. Now, I thank you for letting us have an opportunity over here. If it's all about security, they've already checked us coming through the door. If you're going to put us over here, why not get the officer in the back yonder, put her up here now, because that's where she ought to be, or he ought to be, instead of back there, because I can be up here before she gets me. Is that right? Because I can run pretty fast. Now, the point is that if you're going to do a meeting and you're going to look at things in the right way, public input is important.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rice.
I got some next week, okay?
Okay, yes, ma'am.
My name is Mary Standard, and I reside in Montreat, North Carolina. And with your meetings being at 4:30, when I was working, I would have had to take vacation and annual leave to have been here to make a public comment. However, my subject for this evening. At your previous meeting, Mrs. Joyce Hughes and I stood before you requesting that the Buncombe County Land Use Plan be updated to include renewable energy generating facilities and to express our concern about a solar farm planned for the Lifeway Ridgecrest property in eastern Buncombe County. We thank the board for their responsiveness to these concerns. On September 28, 2012, Maroon Out, an LLC incorporated in New Mexico, filed an application with the Utilities Commission to build a solar farm on the Ridgecrest property. As a point of clarification, in this application, the purpose of this facility was stated not to provide energy to the conference center, but rather to sell specifically power to the grid, that is, to Progress Energy. On October 26, Dale Neal of the Asheville Citizen-Times reported the proposed Ridgecrest project would cover 200 acres, have 90,500 solar panels, and cost some $64.5 million. We are grateful to the Citizen-Times for lifting this project from the often unread back section of the legal classified ads. This article further stated that the Utilities Commission would schedule a public hearing if any complaints were filed before November 16th. 3 complaints were filed, one by Mrs. Hughes, who spoke, one by Mrs. Caldwell, both Ridgecrest residents, and one by me. On December 4th, the Utilities Commission, in response to these complaints, scheduled a public hearing for January 9th. On December 19th, the Commission changed the date to February 13th, the date I shared with you previously. On January 18th, Maroon Out filed a stay of proceedings with the Commission, asking for a delay of 30 days or more. The stay was granted. This is the reason I am here before you tonight. The new date for the public hearing, now the 3rd date set for this public hearing, is now March 27th. Again at the Buncombe County Courthouse, District Courtroom Number 1 at 7 p.m. Mrs. Hughes, Mrs. Caldwell, and I have each received a letter from the applicant asking that we rescind our complaints. I received my 3-page letter on January 19th. with a concluding statement that I would be contacted within the week. More than 2 weeks later, I await that call. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. Yes, sir. And then Alan, we'll get you after him.
I'm good.
You're up.
Thank you. I'm Alan Rosenthal.
That's right, 2 Allens. That's right. I forgot.
I'm Alan Rosenthal. I live here in Asheville. Thank you very much for a wonderful meeting. I really appreciate the discourse and the examination. I thought I was in the majority when I raised my hand for before and after, but I don't have eyes behind my head. I do want to make a couple observations about public comment. I really do believe that it should be before and after. I'm hoping that the decision that you made tonight, we can kind of consider that a living document, if you will. I know that you've heard your complaints and various things way more than I have, but around town, when we're in discussion, and in the city council arena as well, you get your 3 minutes. You never get a response. You get your 3 minutes, and that's really kind of a mantra. You get your 3 minutes. The idea of being able to come beforehand and try to help the commission make a decision, inform the commission with one's opinions or facts is important. On the tail end as well, it's also important to be able for people to make general comments. During the course of an issue, though, I think Commissioner Belcher and maybe some others brought it up, is that new facts come up during the discussion, and the idea of having these high bars as to whether we're going to hear additional comments. I know you could be here all night if we open the discussion up, and we don't want to end up in a endless discussion. But I'm just hoping that you'll kind of consider this as you move along. The other thing, and I do really, quite frankly, I echo everything that Mr. Rice said as well, except that I don't believe that the city council is friendly in that way. The one thing I would like you to consider is the math. Okay, I get 3 minutes, and if I get 8 people to sit down, then I get 10 minutes. And that doesn't square up in my, and I'm terrible at algebra, but I do know that 3 times 8 is 24. And I know that you would hate to have somebody come up with 24, but sometimes you have people who have a lot of information. You don't want them to just drone on, but I think that's the chairman's, the chairman's ability to kind of control that situation. So I'd like you to, in the future, consider the 3 times 8 equals 10 rule, and maybe give people more their due at this range. But thank you very much. This is the first convening of the full commission, I believe, and I just wish you all a lot of luck and success.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Mr. Ditmar?
I'm Alan Ditmore of Leicester. Actually, there's so much here I don't know where to begin. Let's start with math. 3 times 4 is 12, so 4 is not a bad number. The most important thing, though, is I think there was a couple of zoning arguments that I found pretty disturbing. One was the idea that somebody can just come up here, that anybody can come up here and request a variance, and that's an easy thing to do if they have a nice plan. And actually, my sister, who's on some boards in her town, I guess she's more civil than I am or something. She's trying to coach me. She talked about the psychological effect and of the psychological barriers to requesting a variance, and I think it's huge. That you think everybody with a good plan, that requires a variance is going to get a variance. There's thousands of good plans, maybe tens of thousands of good plans from property owners that aren't willing to come forward for a variance because they don't want to kneel to you. That there's I have a whole theory behind it, the law of conservation of self-confidence. The psychological cost of kneeling to you and subjecting myself to your whim and carrying the burden of proof is so high that 90% of the plans aren't going to, 90% of the good plans aren't going to overcome that price. So there's a lot of good plans that you'll never hear about just for that reason alone. The second one was the idea of fairness, the idea that the people like me who had plans and were treated unfairly by zoning would be so vindictive as to want an unfairness, similarly perpetrated on something else. The unfairness is between the big shot elected officials and the peons. It's not between one private citizen and another private citizen. All of the unfairness is between people like you and people like me. I wouldn't be so petty as to say I want your boot on his neck too, just because it's on mine. The third one was about public comment. I think that there's a valid argument for before and after, and if it was for each individual, it was before or after. You could let each individual choose, and the ones who had to work till 5 could speak after.
Thank you, Mr. Ditmore. Any other public comment tonight? If not, is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Jones, second by Commissioner King. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. We'll be in closed session. Thank you.
Well,
Congratulations.
thank you. Oh, yeah, you don't want to touch me. I'm sorry. We'll do a virtual hug right here. So. I know, that's great. That's really great.
Man, we're hacking on it.
All right, we're back in open session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
We adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner King, second by Commissioner Fryer. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Those in favor say see ya. Go home. Hey, Holly, go to the doctor.
Holly, feel better.
That's the only thing I got.
Yeah,
They
no,
had to
that's
give me
good,
some-
Bryce.
No hugs before she left. Thanks for keeping that discussion, that dialogue going on that zoning issue.
Yeah, I didn't catch that the height limits were so different from the zoning that was recommended in what exactly. I had just, based on the way they described it, I just assumed, oh, this building, yeah, this would be used by right with that zoning. So, well, not the height.
No.
So,
And it seems like that when we do the airport, that this should be part of a bigger picture. When we're out there, the airport discussion's going on,